Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Meg O'Connor, senior reporter with The Appeal, on the story of the killing of Jacob Harris. Then Kathy Hempstead, senior policy advisor at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, on the rollbacks of Medicaid and CHIP eligibility as we exit a COVID state of emergency. Meanwhile, Trump declares he's ready for a perp walk. Also, new report. Special counsel claims in a court filing that Trump misled his own attorneys on having stolen secret documents. And just like that, Republican voters are already turning on Tiny D. A little too sanctimonious. U.S. sending M1A1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. It's day 2 of the LA school shutdown as school workers strike for a living wage and are joined in solidarity by teachers. New research finds anti-Semitism has doubled on Twitter under Elon Musk. TikTok CEO to testify on the Hill tomorrow. Arkansas and Georgia pass anti-trans laws, while Uganda makes it illegal to be gay. Fed meets today, torn between protecting banks and attacking labor. And lastly, Florida Don't Say Gay author pleads guilty to COVID relief fraud. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is the day in which 93% of our revenue is derived from our co-host, Emma Viglin's coined catchphrase, which is caught on amazingly. And here she is to deliver it, putting more cash in our coffers.
It is hump day.
There it is, folks.
Ka-ching.
Use that wildly every time. I don't know. This joke never gets old.
People love it. People want it to go on for I think years longer.
Honestly, I never understood your love for it, Sam, but I'll take it, I guess.
You know, like if we had to deliver it like every second day or third day, it would be a problem. But I get a full week from recovering from how my feeling of like, God, enough with that.
Also, from what I gather from your comedy career, this is pretty much how you like jokes to land on audiences, to sort of, grate at them a little bit.
Right.
Exactly. Right. That's true. There is some truth to that. That like when this joke starts actually causing people to bleed from their ears, that's when I know it has landed. Let's get into this. I mean, it's a really interesting moment here in terms of the Trump situation, because between what is happening in New York City with the Manhattan District Attorney's case of Trump lying on his business forms and essentially fraudulently trying to hide the hush money payments as a business expense, what's going on in Georgia, where it appears that it very likely could end up in indictments down there for the election interference that Trump was involved with. I'm really trying to threaten officials to get them to overturn the results of a presidential election. Seems like a big deal. And also the fact that Trump was lying to the DOJ and via his own lawyers in this stolen secret documents case. Again, that one more than any other is just like one where he like clearly could have just walked away from this without an issue, but there, for some reason, was desperate to keep these documents and to lie about it repeatedly. And it's quite possible, like, there could be jail time associated with really any one of these crimes that he allegedly committed. He's going to go through a trial. Maybe they can delay the trial to the point where it's like after the election, but he's going to run, and he's going to run so under indictment, and he seems to think that it's probably going to help him. I have no doubt that it would help him in a Republican primary.
That's why he wants the perp walk optics, right? He wants that image splashed everywhere so he can say, see, it is a witch hunt. They're trying to, come after me for a porn star affair, which is why that is the least, I think, strong foundation to actually go after this guy and nail him on something.
Right. And, maybe he'll do that thing where, like, put me into a big tub of water and see if I float. This is such a witch hunt. But
no one wants to see that.
You've got Ron DeSantis. You got Ron DeSantis now. Like, the more he gets out there and talks, it seems like the less the Republicans like him.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't prove
Republican
that there's a direct
voters. I mean, the established Republican power players are desperate for this indictment to actually bring Trump down because they thought DeSantis would be a formidable challenge, and that's just not happening. It's just not happening.
Yeah, I mean, I can't prove that there's a direct relationship between DeSantis going out there and people actually hearing him talk and being so sanctimonious. And his now he's reached, according to Morning Consult, the lowest level of his approval, tied for it, since they started basically, measuring it. And he can't be too happy about that. But here is Tucker Carlson asking for the impossible. And we know he hates Donald Trump, right? I mean, we know he hates Donald Trump, but at the same time, he also knows that his audience wouldn't like it if he said he hated Donald Trump. So he's in sort of a bit of a jam.
Yeah, he's a destroyer, but he won't destroy us.
Another day of rumors and thinly sourced news stories. Ooh, what's new? These about when and where Donald Trump will be arrested, fingerprinted, and photographed against a cinder block wall for his mugshot. How much of this is true? Once again, we cannot say. Here's what we know. A Soros-funded prosecutor in New York, a man who ran on the promise to indict Trump, seems to be working hard to indict Trump, indicting him for a crime that no one even pretends is a crime, including the federal agency that has already investigated it and declared it not a crime. So in Manhattan tomorrow, what will certainly be an overwhelmingly liberal grand jury will meet, and unless something unexpected happens, Democrats will have taken the unprecedented step of using a corrupt justice system to take out the frontrunner in the Republican presidential field in a presidential race. And if that happens, America will never be the same. You've got to hope that for the sake of the country, the Biden White House, which will be running against Trump, will put the country above partisanship and stop this. That Merrick Garland at DOJ will issue a very public statement saying that this is wrong, which it is, and therefore preserve for our grandchildren our justice system. As a fact, that doesn't seem to be happening.
I mean, first off, the idea that it's Democrats doing this. No, it's an attorney general or district attorney in Manhattan is doing this.
The Soros-funded one?
Yes, it is the non-Soros bankrolled prosecutors in Georgia who are also doing this, right? Like, it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to finagle that. And
Try
the
to act
idea
like it's
that,
not happening anywhere but the New York, I think, is probably going to be the play.
indeed. And the idea that in a great cry for lack of authoritarianism, this is the one night, I guess, a week that Tucker takes off from saying that Joe Biden's an authoritarian, and then begs him to come out and somehow squash the prosecution in New York City.
Yeah. Well, he says it while doing his other favorite pastime, which is dog whistling to white supremacists by saying that Soros-funded thing, which was just like, the Jews control this guy, don't you see? And also tipping his hat to Trump, who was the tweeting out Soros-funded. Then DeSantis says Soros-funded. Then Tucker says Soros-funded. So they're still following the big guy. They're still following the leader here, even when they're trying behind the scenes to do a coup d'état. It's not happening.
It's not happening. In a moment, we're going to be talking to Meg O'Connor, senior reporter with The Appeal, about this horrible story out of Phoenix. And then we'll be talking to Kathy Hempstead about the implications of the COVID emergency ending in terms of Medicaid and the CHIP program. But first, a word from our sponsor. It's been, I would say, a week since I've taken ZBiotics. Sometimes I can anticipate a situation where I need to, and when I can, I do. ZBiotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic. It is genetically engineered, a genetically engineered probiotic. And what you do is you drink it. It's about yay big, the size of a thumb. It's a small, like, little shot bottle, I guess. And what it does is essentially puts a probiotic in your belly. You do this the night before you're going out to have a drink or many drinks. And what it does is make sure that the next day you're not a piece of luggage. And it's been very helpful for me. And apparently the way it works is, and I always thought that the primary driver of why you feel bad the next day is because of dehydration after your drink. But it turns out that alcohol creates a toxic byproduct in your gut. And this probiotic, if you drink it beforehand, then you have a drink or a couple of drinks and you get a decent night sleep. And the next morning, you can go out. You want to work out, you'll be able to work out. I mean, assuming you could work out the day before. It's not one of those things like, doctor, will I be able to play the violin? Yes, should. And I never could before, that type of thing. But if you want to work out, you can work out. If you want to do a podcast, you can do a podcast. If you've got to get to work or you just want to be sharp in general, you feel great. This was a big lifesaver for me on the Nation cruise and I did it as a measure, like a practice, essentially, because I knew, I'm going to dinner. I'm on a boat, and then tomorrow I got to do some talk or an interview, and I didn't want to be messed up for it, and it was great. But every now, like if I'm going to a party or something like that, you can get 15% off your first order of ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic by clicking the link in our podcast or YouTube subscription and using the code majority at checkout. Go to zbiotics.com/majority. That's zbiotics.com/majority. You will get 15% off your first order, and you'll see that stuff really works. It's great. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Meg O'Connor, senior reporter with The Appeal. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Meg O'Connor. She's a senior reporter with The Appeal, which incidentally you can find at theappeal.org. Just an excellent outfit that covers all sorts of criminal justice issues. Meg, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about the situation in which Jacob Harris was shot to death by a Phoenix police officer about 4 years ago.
Yeah, so in 2019, 19-year-old Jacob Harris was shot and killed by a Phoenix police officer. It happened after police had already been surveilling Harris and 3 of his friends for about 12 hours. They had plenty of opportunities to stop Harris and his friends. They suspected the group of being involved in a string of armed robberies at convenience stores and drive-thrus, but they didn't take any of those opportunities. Instead, they chose, several police officers said in a deposition that they allowed a robbery to occur, and then they chose to do a high-stakes maneuver to stop the vehicle that Jacob Harris was in, at which point he ran out of the car, he fled, he ran for all of 2 seconds before a police officer shot at him 11 times in the back.
Has it, it was established that was it ever established that they were responsible for this series of robberies? They clearly committed a robbery that night. Has it been established that they were responsible for the other robberies?
That has been something that I haven't looked into as much, though I have seen, all 3 they took plea deals and they did plead guilty to committing some of the robberies that they were accused of committing. We reviewed thousands of pages of records for this case, but I was not able to get the Phoenix Police Department's report on the robbery investigation. But they ultimately, I believe each of the kids pled to only 1 or 2 of the robbery instances, or maybe 3 tops, and they were accused. They had a 128 count indictment against them for various robbery charges.
Okay, so let's start with let's cover that day, because basically the story is that the Phoenix police are looking for what they perceive to be like a group of kids who, and they're not all kids. Some were 20, but some were 14. And there were 4 of them, if I'm not mistaken. And they're looking for them in regards to this series of robberies. That, as far as I can tell from your reporting, nobody was hurt in any of these robberies, but they were, robbing like fast food places and whatnot. And so they settle on this one guy who had had one conviction in the past, and they start surveilling them. And we only know so much about what their plan was, because they deleted all of their sort of internal exchanges. All right, so start with just sort of like what they did, and then we'll talk about why we don't know really what their plan was.
Sure, yeah. So basically, a robbery detective with the Phoenix Police Department, his name is Jacob Rasmussen. He is apparently standard procedure for robbery detectives to look at robbery reports that they have and try to identify similarities. So in this case, he was looking for cases involving Whataburgers and Circle K's, cases involving young men of color of a kind of smaller stature, but also some of them were taller. Some of them involved a red or maroon SUV, others involved a white car. So there was a big variety in what he was looking for, but he kind of honed it on the Circle K's and Whataburgers, and he asked for other police departments in the Valley and Maricopa County if they had any similar cases. The Glendale Police Department sent over a case to him involving a 20-year-old Jeremiah Triplett who had been arrested for robbing a Circle K for a bottle of Hennessy and some cigarettes back in September. So the next day, police started surveilling, it seems like Triplett and perhaps others. There are some questions remaining from the records in terms of who they surveilled. Was it just Triplet? Because the records that I have begin with Jacob Harris's death. So it's related to the surveillance of him. And there were other people with Jeremiah Triplet when he was arrested back in September. So I'm unclear whether they surveilled those other people, but they at least surveilled this group, which involved these 4 kids. And there were other people that were photographed with them that day. They used an aircraft in addition to several on-the-ground police officers to surveil the group. They ended up watching them for something like 12 hours.
Can I just say too, like at this point, what I was struck by, I mean, this isn't even really the point of the story, but I was really shocked at the amount of resources that they seem to have available to surveil these teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're using an airplane. They're using like multiple police officers. And again, there's every reason to believe that we just know this story of who they were surveilling. But if this main guy that they were sort of like tipped off to, there could have been 2 or 3 other groups of people that they were surveilling as well. I was sort of struck by that, but continue. So these guys, they're surveilling them over the course of the day. They get the sense, the police do, that they're, prepping for a robbery. They follow them to the fast food place, and they witness the robbery. About what time did the police witness the robbery?
It was just around midnight.
And okay. And so they, and in the piece, you make it clear that if they had wanted to arrest any members of these guys, there was a couple of things over the course of the day that they could have. Somebody was drinking illegally. Somebody had an air gun that they could have assumed was an actual weapon. Somebody else did have a weapon, I think, and was on probation, was a trivet.
Yeah, which he was later charged with. Yeah.
And so they had reason, but they wanted to let this play out so that they could arrest them on robbery charges, which, if they're really worried about what these guys are going to do when they go in for a robbery, you're risking the lives of the people who work at this restaurant, right?
Yeah. They wanted to watch the robbery occur because they say that they didn't think they had probable cause for the couple of dozen, maybe up to 29 robberies that they thought this group was previously involved with, which is, it's as you mentioned before, the level of surveillance for this group of people was pretty outstanding. At one point, the surveillance officer in the aircraft was asked to get approval from the FAA to stay in the air. That's how long he was up there. And yet they also didn't think that they had probable cause.
That seems like sort of at odds with each other a little bit, it seems to me. But be that as it may, they witnessed the robbery. And then what happens?
They witnessed the robbery. And as you mentioned, it involved, scaring the restaurant workers, though no one was physically harmed in any of these cases. They did say that they were traumatized and scared. The group left. It was 3 people: Jacob Harris, who's 19, Jeremiah Triplet, who was 20, and 14-year-old Johnny Reed. And then they got into the car of 19-year-old Soraya Busani, who drove away from the Whataburger. Police followed them, both in their cars and in an aircraft. They were unmarked cars. It wasn't a high-speed chase with lights or sirens. The police just followed them silently for about 10 minutes until one police officer got very close to the end of the car, to the Busani's Honda Passport, and deployed a device that's known as the grappler. It's like a tether, net type situation that deploys in the car and seizes the tire so that it grinds to a halt. So they use this device called the grappler. The car seizes to a stop.
And I'm sorry for 1 second.
Yeah.
This was the first time, in my understanding, that they had used the grappler. So
professional setting, yeah. He had done it a few times in practice, but they had just acquired the tool, yeah.
I mean, at this point, this all sounds like this is an opportunity for us to test out some of our new toys on some level, right? Like, I mean, they waited 10 minutes as opposed to like, as if almost like they wanted them in an area where we can try out the grappler. And
we can catch them in the crime and use the new toys to right, exactly. It's more about their perception of themselves as cops, like in the dangerous situation.
Yeah, and they definitely had an opportunity to do other kinds of stops. Something called a street jump was discussed, where it's just several police vehicles that come up and stop the car. They decided not to do that, even though Busani had just stopped at a red light before they deployed the grappler. They also said multiple times that they wouldn't have stopped the robbery as it occurred in the Whataburger because it could put people's lives at risk, which makes sense, but it put people's lives at risk to allow the robbery to occur in the first place when police could have arrested the group at any of the 12 hours prior while they were watching them, particularly because they later charged Jeremiah Triplett with one of the offenses they saw him committing earlier in the day, which is having a weapon when he was a convicted felon.
Okay, and so they stopped the car with this grappler toy that they have. And at that moment, we have video, but it's thermal video, right? I mean, just to explain what that is so that people know. I mean, people probably have seen it. They just don't know what it is.
Yeah, so there is video from the aircraft that's thermal video captured by, I forget the particular name of the camera, but it's a pretty impressive camera that captured the whole incident. And apparently none of the officers who were there that night were wearing body cams.
Is that required of Phoenix officers?
It is now.
Well, it was not at the time.
I think this particular unit, the Special Assignments Unit, which is the Phoenix Police Department's equivalent of SWAT at the time, did not have body cameras, though other departments did, and apparently the SAU has now received them.
Okay, so we have thermal video footage of this. What happens when the car is pulled over?
So when the car stops, it's obviously, I talked to some of the people who were inside the vehicle at the time. It's pretty confusing. They didn't see police cars. They were unmarked. The car seizes to a stop. It turns kind of to the right when that happens. One Officer Christopher Burtz, throws a flashbang, which emits an insanely bright light and a loud sound that sounds like a gunshot. In that moment, 19-year-old Jacob Harris opens the rear passenger door of the Honda Passport, which is near the side of the road, kind of ahead of Officers Burtz and Norman. And he runs out of the vehicle. He is running away from the officers. The video shows him just running for, I think he takes something like 7 steps within 2 seconds before the officers shot at him 11 times. 2 of them, both from Burtz's AR-15 style rifle, hit Jacob in the back and pierced his heart and lungs and intestines.
So go ahead, Sam. No, I mean, just to clarify, they were using AR-15s. And there's this kind of there's conflicting testimony about what Jacob had on him, right? What are the cops saying was their justification for using such a intense weaponry? So
Officer Burtz, who was the one who ultimately killed Jacob, had an AR-15. Officer Norman had a handgun. All of his shots missed. Jacob is accused of having a handgun himself. And their justification is kind of layered. Obviously, police can say in this situation that because he was allegedly holding a gun, they feared for their lives. But at the end of the day, Jacob's father, Roland Harris, sued the city of Phoenix and Officer Christopher Burtz, and a federal court, he's appealing the case, but a federal court dismissed it based on the fact that Arizona law permits law enforcement officers to use deadly force simply when someone has committed a felony and is fleeing. So you don't even need to be afraid for your life. You can kill someone for committing a felony and fleeing.
What was the flashbang about? Is that standard operating procedure? Once we have stopped the car, first thing we do, we throw a flashbang?
Yeah. So in his deposition, Christopher Bird said that he did it to try to keep the occupants of the vehicle inside the vehicle. This was a point of contention in the deposition because Burtz had taught other officers on how to deploy weaponry and including flashbangs. And you are taught to let other officers know when you're going to do it because it can be confusing and it does sound like a gunshot. Another officer in the police report on Jacob Harris's death said himself that he thought that the suspects in the vehicle had fired a gun because it's confusing. But he did not alert anyone to the fact that he was about to deploy a flashbang. He said in his deposition that it was, a very fast-paced moment where he was making second-by-second decisions. But yeah.
He claims he hadn't told any of the other officers, right? I mean, because we can't establish what they were saying to each other just before this happened because they deleted all of their WhatsApp communication shortly after they killed Jacob Harris, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, so we don't really know what their plan was. It seems odd to me that you've been surveilling somebody for 12 hours. You take the time to watch them commit a crime, which you know that they're doing. You have 10 minutes in which you're in pursuit of them. You know you're going to deploy this new thing to capture the tire, and then out of the blue you decide, you know what, flashbang. I mean, that just sounds super, super hard to believe that was not premeditated. And then you have to ask why, and the idea that they wouldn't have communicated that with the other officers, you have to ask, why are they denying, why deny that they knew that? I mean, if the rest of the stuff makes sense to somebody, so be it. But the people inside the car, did they know, at what point did they realize that these people were police?
Mm-hmm. There's some dispute over that. Police have alleged that Jeremiah Triplett knew that that police were following them, although their statements to that fact have been kind of inconsistent and confusing. They claim that Jeremiah, when they arrested the other people in the vehicle, Soraya, Jeremiah, and Johnny afterwards, only Jeremiah talked to the police. And Jeremiah said something to the effect of he didn't say exactly that he knew police were following them, but police said that he told the others to be smooth or see smooth. Alternately, they have quoted both of those things, and claimed that means that he knew police were following them, although it seems like saying be smooth or see smooth would be a pretty normal thing to say after you've committed a crime. But yeah, Soraya and Johnny have said that they didn't know that police were behind them. So
Jacob gets shot to death, and it's also just sort of brutal. After they shoot him those times, they keep shooting him with rubber bullets and deploy a dog on him, and he's dead within an hour.
Yeah, it's awful.
And then the three people in the car end up going to jail, not just because they committed this robbery, and one of them is a 14-year-old being housed in an adult facility. They go to jail for years and years and years and years because they're faced with, they're told by the prosecutor, and we should also say they spend 3 years because they can't afford bail. So they spend 3 years in jail before their trial even. And which gives you a sense of, like, what kind of quality of defense that they could probably muster when it came time to a plea bargain. And they go to jail not just for the robbery, but also for the murder of Jacob Harris. Is that right?
Yeah. So after police killed Jacob Harris, the three were arrested and yeah, they were all in jail for 3 years, held on Jeremiah and Soraya were held on $1 million bond. Johnny, who's 14, was held on a $500,000 bond, but none of them could afford that. And they were charged with felony murder, which is a law that allows people to be charged with someone else's murder if someone died during the commission of a felony. So even though everyone agrees the police killed Jacob Harris, the prosecutor's office ultimately determined that the police officer did nothing wrong, but that Jacob Harris's 3 friends, including the 14-year-old, were responsible for his death.
What is the commission of the what felony was committed in Jacob in that moment? I understand the felony was the robbery, but does that last? Like if I commit a robbery yesterday, am I still in the presence of a commission, or are they saying they're fleeing from a robbery?
That's actually an interesting point, because that is something that Soraya's defense attorney brought up at one point. He argued that the kind of chain or the linkage of these events had been broken by the fact that it was 10 minutes since the felony occurred. And I believe that this, didn't make it in this story, so I don't remember it as well. But I believe that prosecutors argued that they were still committing a felony because they were fleeing, but no one was charged with fleeing law enforcement. They hit them with ultimately over 140 criminal charges, and fleeing was not one of them.
And there's no indication that they even knew the police were following them. So how can they be fleeing the police at that point? They didn't even know that it was necessarily the police deploying a flashbang when they stop and run out of the car. And it also occurs to me that, if this is, I understand this is the law, and that, maybe there's a legislative problem too, but what's to prevent the police from doing this as a matter of course? If we catch people fleeing, leaving the scene of a robbery, we have every right under Arizona law to shoot them dead, and then we can blame everybody around them will be responsible for this guy's death.
Yeah, it's an alarming precedent, and it has already happened with one of the officers involved in this case. One of the 2 officers who shot at Jacob Harris previously shot and killed someone while they were, I think, stealing a car and involved in a police chase. Shot and killed the man. The man's girlfriend was in the vehicle with him at the time. The girlfriend was charged with his murder, and I think it was sentenced to maybe 7 years or in prison or something like that.
It's just an amazing case. People should look into it. Is there any is there any doubt in your mind that had these guys had better representation, that there would have been a some type of mitigation on this prosecution?
If they had been able to afford high-powered attorneys, of course they would not have been coerced by the prosecutor's office to take these shocking plea deals. The Jeremiah triplet, who was 20, is serving 30 years in prison, which is very concerning because he has a serious health condition that has required 6 brain surgeries in his lifetime already. So he's definitely going to need more during his incarceration. And as we all know, prison healthcare is not exactly great. And Johnny, who was 14, was sentenced to 15 years, more years than he had even been alive at the time when this occurred. So I think that if they had better representation, sure, they probably could have fought the charges, but it's also, just kind of par for the course for the Maricopa County Attorney's Office to level such egregious charges against people. And had they not been charged with Jacob's murder that the police committed, they certainly would not be serving such a long sentence. The top charge that they all pled to was either manslaughter or negligent homicide. So that is one of the things that made their sentences so long.
Are the police, are they facing any type of charges, disciplinary action, anything to that effect for deleting all of their contact with each other in the moments leading up to that thing? Because they're supposed to keep those records, aren't they?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be clear, we obtained radio transcript that shows a communications between police officers saying, "Can you throw the 52 squad," which is what Burt's, who killed Jacob Harris, was onto WhatsApp. When during the civil suit brought by Roland Harris, he asked for those records, those WhatsApp records. Burt said he didn't have them and that he deleted them, and didn't know.
What does that mean to throw on the special squad onto WhatsApp? What does that mean?
It means to, as Burt explained in his deposition, it means just to send the information that they were talking about on the police radio onto WhatsApp, so that all the squad members who are using WhatsApp to communicate can view it on there.
So that they can delete it.
Yeah, those records are allegedly deleted, and we will never know what they said. Roland Harris, Jacob's father, speculates that they could have been planning or covering something up. But yeah, as far as I know, Burt says, is cleared of any wrongdoing in the killing of Jacob Harris, both as a matter of Phoenix Police Department policy and criminally. But I don't know if he was ever investigated for deleting those records.
It's a crazy story. You did a great job in the reporting of this. So congratulations to you, but it really is incredibly disturbing. Meg O'Connor, we will put a link to your piece. Police killed his son. Prosecutors charged the teen's friends with his murder on theappeal.org. Really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Kathy Hempstead. She's a senior policy advisor at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation about the implications of the COVID emergency order being rescinded in this coming April, and what it's going to mean for people's who are on CHIP, or kids who are on CHIP, or folks on Medicaid. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Kathy Hempstead. She is a senior policy advisor at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And Kathy, welcome to the program. We have seen over the course of COVID, via a couple of different relief bills, if you will, the last of which was the American Rescue Act, all sorts of funding for things like a child tax credit for children, expansion of the SNAP program. We saw extended unemployment. We saw expanded unemployment benefits. All of these things now have gone away, despite the fact that we know they had a great impact in reducing poverty writ large, and particularly child poverty in this country, up to 35% of maybe 40% of child poverty was taken care of by this. One other aspect of this was the expansion of CHIP and Medicaid, which got people onto health insurance. Tell us under what auspices did that CHIP and Medicaid expansion happen, and how?
Sure, that's a good question. When the public health emergency went into effect in January of 2020, it created a bunch of different sort of new health flexibilities, which in many ways, as you kind of alluded to with some of the other things you mentioned, increased equity and really helped people out. I mean, one of the things it did was allow people who were uninsured to get care, testing, treatment for COVID at no cost, and eliminated cost sharing for COVID treatment and ultimately vaccinations, but tests for people who were insured. And then another super important thing that was part of that public health emergency was to create this continuous coverage rule in Medicaid, which didn't exactly expand eligibility, but it eliminated the normal process by which states sort of continuously reassess eligibility, so that some people lose eligibility and are, disenrolled sort of at different points throughout the year. So in a way, it kind of shut the back door sort of for Medicaid so that people could come in, but nobody would be forced to leave. So over the course of the last 2 years, enrollment in Medicaid has grown a lot. And as a result, we have an all-time low uninsurance rate, which is really terrific.
So the COVID relief, the COVID emergency that was declared by, I guess, the CDC, what agency is it? Health and Human Services then has the regulatory ability to waive or to mandate that states no longer make these reassessments, where they basically the reassessments where they kick people off the rolls of Medicaid because maybe. What are the reasons why they would get kicked off? I mean, they're not poor enough anymore, or what? I mean, walk through us what like the typical ones, because I imagine they change state by state, which is also the part of the problem.
I mean, right? It's there are a million different details to this, going state by state. So I'll just sort of try to give you the big picture, with the context that state eligibility rules for Medicaid are different. Famously, as we know, most states expanded Medicaid eligibility under the ACA to low income adults, but there's a handful of states that have not. So that's a big eligibility difference.
11, Florida for one is not one. I think 900,000 or 600,000 people are going to be thrown off the rolls when in May when this happens. But go ahead.
In Florida, I mean, and that could be like a credible national estimate is that approximately, 15 to 18 million people could lose Medicaid eligibility when this process sort of has run its course. That doesn't mean all those people are going to lose coverage, which is something we can talk about, but it's certainly going to be, extremely disruptive. But during just the status quo ante sort of normal life with Medicaid is, states, and they don't do it all the same way. They do it on different time schedules and using different mechanisms, but states periodically, assess the continued eligibility of people enrolled in the program. And you can lose eligibility because your income increases. I mean, people that are in Medicaid because they have disabilities are much less likely to see their eligibility change, but income-based eligibility can change when people's income goes up. But many times people are disenrolled for sort of procedural or just kind of bureaucratic reasons where they're not truly ineligible, but maybe they move and they don't get a piece of mail, or they, don't respond to something in time. And there is a continued occurrence of something that people call churn, which is sort of like going on and off Medicaid by a population of people that are, that are actually eligible the whole time, or maybe they have a tiny fluctuation in income, but quickly they're back into a position of eligibility. So what the public health emergency did, the continuous coverage rule, is it eliminated that churn. It kind of just smoothed that out. So people that came into the program weren't disenrolled at any point during this period. And that's why we've kind of sort of stacked up, enrollment's grown and grown. And now we're going to have this process, starting April 1st, where states, using different approaches and with different goals in mind to a certain extent, are going to start to reassess all that eligibility, and that's when we're going to see, a lot of people lose their eligibility for Medicaid, and some of that will be sort of mistakes, inappropriate, and lots of those folks will come back on, but not all of them. But the goal, certainly the goal of the federal government is to minimize that inappropriate disenrollment.
When states do this, right? I mean, and I don't mean to pick on Florida, but I have no problem picking on Florida. Florida is sort of renowned for having a very difficult unemployment process in which you can claim unemployment. And the theory I have heard, which I think makes a lot of sense, is they don't want to pay out that much. And by slowing the wheels and by creating obstacles. I mean, we see this in all sorts of like private bureaucracies as well. I mean, you want to claim your insurance, your health insurance. You need to have every form filled out in a weird way that they want it to be to claim your health insurance, and they reject it, and they're making money on the float even if they know they ultimately, and a lot of people just stop pursuing it because it's too difficult, not worth it. With Medicaid, what is the agenda here, and does it change state to state? Like if you were to sort of categorize, we have some states who just want to drop their rolls as much as possible. We have others that are feeling, budgetary pinches and want to, reduce their rolls. We have other states that are just, they'll fulfill, they'll try and get as many people on there as possible. I mean, could you classify these states that way? And what is the benefit if it's a federal program? What's the benefit of a state to kick people off?
Well, I'll just answer that last one really quickly. It's jointly funded by the federal and state government, and especially in sort of poorer states, the federal government's paying a lot more, and the federal government increased its share during this emergency when it was asking states not to remove anyone from the rolls. But there is a state fiscal component, and that's why, the states that haven't expanded Medicaid yet under the ACA always say that they can't do it, even though study after study after study after study has shown that fiscally they would come out ahead. But there is a state component, and that's something that states will talk about when they talk about their interest in doing this procedure more quickly relatively than more slowly. I think I would say two things. I would say, full stop, it's a huge logistical challenge for every single state. There's no playbook for this. There's really no precedent. We have maybe 15 or 18 million people are going to change their coverage status. And that's a volume that's on par with all the people that gained coverage during the Affordable Care Act. So, whether no matter what your sort of attitude about Medicaid is, it's a huge logistical challenge, and states are going to have to staff up and do all these things, and it's very, very difficult. That being said, I think it's also an opportunity for states to kind of display their sort of persona about Medicaid, and some states will act like the most important thing is to sort of get rid of the false positives, remove the people that are on the rolls but not eligible. Other states are going to act like the most important thing is to minimize like the false negatives, like churning people off who shouldn't be churned off, and will be like more, emphasizing being more deliberative, taking longer, providing more messages. Other states, and I think maybe Arkansas has kind of distinguished itself in this way, has really publicized the fact that they want to do this as quickly as possible, and sort of when they talk about what the objectives are, the thing they'll say first is like maintain the integrity of the Medicaid program, and what they'll say second is use resources to help the most vulnerable, et cetera. But I would say, one just thing to I think for no matter what anybody might say kind of posturally about that, it's a big accountability issue for governors. Like even in Arkansas, like a third of the population is on Medicaid. So I think that if a state is perceived as being reckless or sloppy, not doing a good job, and people are inappropriately disconnected from coverage, people that are getting treated for conditions or need medications, I mean, that's going to be an issue. So I think that even states that are making these kinds of comments, are probably also thinking that there's a lot at stake here, and they need to be careful.
I mean, maybe I'm jaded, but if I'm Sarah Huckabee, I'm Sanders. I'm excited to go to next year's CPAC and talk about how many people I kicked off of Medicaid. I mean, I may be a little jaded in that respect, but let me ask you this from a dollar perspective. Like, I mean, when we hear that we're kicking off that, you know, and it depends on how it's executed by the states. So it could be anywhere from 10 to 15 million people. Maybe, I don't know how wide the window is, but that we're kicking people off of health insurance, right? This is Medicaid too. So it's not like there are, you know, and maybe there are people who are making $100, $200, $300, $500,000 a year who are getting by, staying on Medicaid somehow. They're involved in this and they don't want to pay for health insurance. I'm sure somewhere in the country we could find an example of that. But broadly speaking, the idea that, it's somehow wasteful or fraudulent to have somebody who's making, $1,000 a year annually over whatever the depending on what the state is, over the threshold, just seems just on its face to be just ridiculous, that we would uninsure these people because, like you say, that person's uninsured. If they get sick, they're going to go to the emergency room. The taxpayer is going to be paying 120% of what they would otherwise be paying, essentially, or whatever the figure is. They're going to be paying more. It's not even fiscally responsible. This is really more an ideological thing on some level, it seems to me. How much money is being saved here after you net out all the administrative costs associated with keeping people off, and then the projections as to how much they're going to cost, because 20% of the people you kick off are going to end up in the emergency room probably within the next month or something over the course of next year.
Well, let me say two things. I think you're absolutely right, is that the churn is just a deadweight loss. It's terrible for people. It's terrible for the state. It's terrible for the federal government. It's terrible for providers, because people are, constantly going on and off the program because of just bureaucratic snafus or just tiny little changes in their income. So I want to lay that out. But just to clarify on the bigger point, these 15 to 18 million people are not going to all become uninsured. Most estimates believe that more than half of them are actually either already enrolled in employer insurance or very soon will be. Like maybe their spouses has employer insurance and they're going to pick it up. We believe a lot of people don't even know that they're still enrolled in Medicaid. So it is bad, but it's not quite as bad as that sounds, because that would increase the uninsurance rate nationally by like 50%, but it's not that bad. But we do think that about 20% of these folks, maybe 3-4 million people nationally, will end up uninsured. So that, that's a terrible shame. And that's a huge problem, because we were at this, historic low with uninsurance thanks to this emergency measure. And it's going to depend on the way states behave and what state officials do to both not inappropriately terminate people and then also try to transition people to either the marketplace or CHIP, so that people that do lose eligibility for Medicaid don't end up uninsured. So the goal is to minimize inappropriate terminations and to maximize transitions for people that don't have ESI. Okay,
so if it is the case, only 3 or 4 million people, and
that's a lot of people.
A lot of people are going to lose their health insurance, because you have other people who could go on to secondary insurance, or they could go on to spouse, or they could get a job soon. And presumably if they have that insurance available to them, they're more likely to use that one because it probably has more access to providers than Medicaid generally does. In which case they're not costing the Medicaid system really anything while they're on it, because they're not using it. So the expense to throw them off is actually more expensive than the use of their Medicaid. And then presuming that if there's churn and they fall back into it, then you need to administer them back into the program, creating more cost associated with that. But with that said, 3 or 4 million people without insurance, hopefully it's less, hopefully not more, but presuming 3 or 4 million people, then, because the others it's not savings, right? For the federal government. I mean, if they're not really using Medicaid, and maybe there's some that are, but they could be using something else, I guess, and they would be carrying the expense. How much money do we know that is going to be saved?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there are definitely people now that aren't really filing claims or using services. There's still sort of a contract in most states between the state and a managed care organization to care for people that are enrolled. And that, I think in many states, that contract has been adjusted to, kind of account for the fact that there are people that are enrolled but aren't really using services. And that's probably because they're enrolled somewhere else, and they're using services somewhere else. Some of them may not even remember that that at one point they were enrolled in Medicaid. I mean, that's really possible. But I mean, those are kind of non-problems, really, compared to people that either are eligible and fall between the cracks. And, we
Right.
know, for example, that the majority of people that are facing this, this bureaucratic nightmare don't even know about it. They're not even aware that this is happening. They're just out there kind of living their lives. They may not even know that the program, the health insurance that they have is called Medicaid. Every state calls these programs something different. And people are just famously uninterested in insurance. They don't want to think about their insurance. They don't want to switch car insurance. They don't want to switch health insurance. Like, they don't want to think about insurance. So these issues that really consume so many people that think about health insurance all the time, the people that are most affected, I think a lot of them are going to be caught unawares, even though there's been a lot of effort to think about how to communicate with people. And that's one of the things that, everybody's really worried about, is people not getting messages, not responding, and then sort of falling through the cracks. And hopefully they'll find their way back to Medicaid. But, some of them will have important interruptions in care that will be consequential for them and, may not get back for a while. So that's something that everybody's super worried about.
Well, I'm sorry. I keep pressing on this point. I guess I'm trying to figure out, I mean, there's a statutory obligation, I guess, to kick these people off of Medicare. Is that it? Like, what's the rationale? I mean, Medicaid, I should say. What's the rationale for doing this? I'm trying, like, does anybody have a number? Is there anybody out there going like, it's going to save the U.S. government $100 billion this year? Or is it just, we're doing this because we're statutorily obligated? We have no option. I mean, what's the point?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a normal thing to routinely assess the eligibility of people for means tested programs. I mean, I don't think that's crazy. I think it's unfortunate how much the sort of status quo ante practice varied in states, and how like consumer unfriendly it often is, and how hard it is for people. We suspended all that during the pandemic, which I think was great because it boosted coverage. And now we're going to go back to the normal, which I sort of think I understand the reason for doing it, but the practice in which it takes place is often really puts people at a disadvantage, and people often lose coverage inadvertently. And that's just been this kind of cost that we've come to accept, churn and Medicaid, but it's sort of bad for everybody. So we're, kind of back to that again. But
I still don't understand. I mean, okay, I get that we're going back to normal. Normal was bad. We agree that normal was bad because of churn. I'm just curious, is like anybody out there going like, we need to get back to normal because we're going to save X or Y?
Well, I mean, we need to get back to normal because those are the rules of our sort of normal healthcare system, which I think a lot of people could say is, very fragmented, very complicated, very difficult for people, and, leaves a lot of us uncovered. So I think if you said, gee, wouldn't it be great if we just had like one single system that was so much easier for people to participate in, then we wouldn't have all these problems to begin with, and we wouldn't have had to have erect all these measures during the pandemic, and then we wouldn't have to go back to the same system. I mean, I think that's like a very reasonable thing to say. And in fact, there's some states that are so kind of tired and sick of seeing these people like just making, a little bit too much for Medicaid and falling out and not having another option, or not being able to afford going into the marketplace or whatever, that they've created things like basic health plans, or they've really double down on efforts to, like, say, for a population like kids, to like not redetermine their eligibility for long periods of time, to not interrupt coverage for people. So I do think that there are lots of people that sort of hate this aspect of the normal, where we redetermine people's eligibility, and we are often, either because they missed a message or because they have a slight change in their income, which is still very low, turning people out of their health insurance coverage, which nobody likes.
So how does North Carolina fit into this, right? I mean, they became the 40th state to expand.
Right.
I'm just curious about that particular set of circumstances into the larger Medicaid ecosystem here.
Well, I mean, it's great news, and estimated 600,000 people, I think, will gain coverage in North Carolina. That's one of the bigger states that hadn't expanded. Obviously, Texas, Florida, Georgia, other really big states where there are a lot of people in the so-called coverage gap, which is one of the sort of cruelest things about our healthcare system, where there are people who are too poor for the marketplace, so they're not allowed to go to the marketplace, but then they have no other option, and their option is to be uninsured until these states expand Medicaid, which is something that would just be wonderful if all the states would do. So it's great news that North Carolina is expanding Medicaid, and we certainly would love to see the other states make the same decision. How does it affect the unwinding issue? I mean, it's going to take place a little bit later. It's kind of separate. I think, in the expansion states, thinking again about kind of the metaphor of the front door and the back door. In the expansion states, the front door is a little bigger because there are more ways that people can be eligible for Medicaid. So, the back door might be a little bigger too when it opens, and we might see sort of more disenrollment of low-income adults in expansion states in general, but they're more likely to have some place to go because those states, employers make more offers. And, I think that, like New York, for example, has a basic health plan, and there's more options for adults. I think in the non-expansion states, we're going to see a little bit less of that because fewer of those folks are eligible to begin with because they haven't expanded Medicaid, and we're going to see a lot of children, and most of those children should be eligible for CHIP. But there is a concern that even some kids could fall through the cracks if there's not sufficient outreach.
3 to 4 million you anticipate will be out of insurance after all of this is said and done. How many children? I would imagine much less, because there are CHIP programs that sort of like catch them when they fall out of this Medicaid expansion.
Yeah, I think the child uninsurance rate now is something like 3.7%, which is super low, and that's something that is a big achievement. And I think there's always going to be a prioritization for keeping children covered, and even in states that haven't expanded Medicaid to low-income adults, they have CHIP programs with reasonable eligibility. So there's certainly a hope that we're not going to see a lot of children lose coverage. But I mean, I don't think it's crazy to think that some will. And there's certainly linkages between children's coverage and adults coverage. So when adults lose coverage, sometimes we see kids lose coverage, and parents and children, and sort of the reverse can be the same. So I think that it's certainly a concern, but there is the CHIP mechanism, which is helpful for kids.
Kathy Hempstead, Senior Policy Advisor at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. This conversation would have been so much easier if we just had some form of Medicaid for all or Medicare for all. We wouldn't have had anything to talk about.
We wouldn't have the conversation, I mean, no. I think that the public health emergency, there's things about it that weren't equity promoting, but I think the flexibilities around health insurance were things that really did promote more equity and give more people access to healthcare and coverage. And now, unfortunately, we're about to kind of erect all of the barriers to that we had before the pandemic.
I could only imagine if we had folks from, European listeners listening to this conversation, just completely bewildered that we can be sitting here going like, good news is only 4% of our children don't have health insurance. I mean, it's nuts. But thank you so much for walking us through it.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, folks. that is it for the first half of the program. And I will be leaving on a jet plane, as it were. I am
Have you
headed
revealed
down.
the reason? Okay.
Yes, I mentioned this yesterday. I'm going down to Florida. I cannot tell you how much I have asked myself in the past 12 hours, like, why am I doing this? But it was, I have Thursdays off, and I didn't have a dentist appointment or the haircut, and I don't have the kids this week, and I don't know. Somehow I thought like, oh, well, I'll see Florida, but I realize now, like, I'm not going to see anything of Florida. I'm going to get down there. It's going to be nighttime. First thing in the morning, I go to Patrick Bet David's studio, and then I go right from the studio back onto the plane to get back here for
inexplicable decision. I mean, to not just stay in the warmth for like one more day at least.
I don't know what I was thinking.
You have such little faith in us to run the show. I mean, I think that must be it.
No, I don't know if it's like some type of like, I don't know, I felt bad like going down to Florida, but like, I'm also, what am I going to do?
You're going to DeSantis's Florida? You're not
Yeah, you're not boycotting?
Well, I'm there, so I won't spend any money. How's that? Down
yeah.
Famished by the time you get there.
I'm bringing my own food.
Oh,
I'm bringing like 4 or 5 turkey sandwiches, and
yeah, shout out to whoever's sitting next to you on that airplane.
Yes, a bag of hard-boiled eggs.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just straight liquid IV.
But that's my normal eating patterns.
Yeah.
I'd just be like, I'd give you one, but I'm not.
Are you one of those guys
in Florida?
Are you one of those guys
who eats a sandwich on the?
No, do you bring eggs on the plane? Do you bring
smelly food on the plane?
No.
Oh, thank God. Okay, just wanted to make
sure.
Who
would do that? Who would open up an egg on the plane?
Plenty of assholes. Plenty of people. One time I was sitting on a plane, my sister was next to me, and a guy, I look in between the armrests, and there's 3 dirty toes. And the guy was like cramming his bare foot in between I have a picture of it, in between where we were sitting. Yeah. So people do crazy
bad things would happen to those toes if I saw them. I can assure you. Like let's see. Disgusting. Didn't Rush give up the ghost last time Sam went down to Florida? You know, as a total coincidence. Did that happen?
Yeah, I think.
I mean, you went to Disney since then, I think, right? Mm-hmm. Or was that the same trip? I don't know.
May have been the same trip.
But then then Russia invaded Ukraine. So prepare for big news tomorrow.
That's right. Well, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah, right. There we go.
Trump indictment tomorrow. You can bank on it, folks. I will not be here. So enjoy coverage of that. Folks, just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. I should also say I'm not paying for any of this trip. That was the other part. Like, just like the idea that, I mean, I did hear like, oh, free travel down to Florida. He's putting me up. And then it just didn't occur to me, like, is this really going to be fun?
Mm-hmm.
And that part, like, I'm too slow on certain things, but it should be interesting conversation with the guy. I don't really know much about him, to be honest. I'm starting to watch some of the interviews he's done in the past. I don't know. I guess he's huge. He does huge numbers. I don't know how I hadn't heard about him, but again, like you could bring in every single person who won an Oscar and put them right in front of me right now, and I would just be like, why are these people here?
I'll never forget you not knowing that like Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt were together. That was
I did know that they were together.
Oh, okay.
Didn't they break up?
Yeah.
All right. See, there you go.
Pretty big deal. Yeah.
What's happening with Brangelina?
They also broke up.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
All right. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only help this show survive and thrive, you also get the free half, free of commercials. And then in the fun half, you can IM Emma today if you have the app at majorityapp.com. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. I will sign off and see you guys on Friday. And Emma, ESVN as I exit. Bye, Bradley. Bye, Matt.
Bye, Sam. Have fun. On ESVN, we spoke about week 1 of NFL free agency, March Madness upsets, the Aaron Rodgers drama explained, and more. YouTube.com/ESVN show. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning last night, we had Danny Bessner on to talk about his fascism piece, and we also touched on Ted Lasso being at the White House.
So like mental health is just a thing we say now, right?
It's a thing we just all got to take seriously, and we all got to do our part and pitch in like it's litter or something.
Yeah, right. We all have to just, collectively understand that mental health is an issue and then apparently not do anything about nationalizing our health care.
It was kind of a fascinating event because during it, one of the only like African news reporters in the press corps started yelling at Karine Jean-Pierre with the cast of Ted Lasso behind her. Because he hasn't gotten a question in 7 months. And so like it's just like Jason Sudeikis and Brett Goldstein and Brendan McDonald just like standing there while this guy's like, Karine, you never call on me.
I mean, that's an awkward situation.
It was all around like a kind of weird thing to go on.
Yeah, I mean, we should actually play it in the fun half.
Yeah, I'll get the clip.
Look, I think fine. Like, watch what you want, and I think like, Ted Lasso is a polarizing show, but I think if you enjoy it. But like, there's a internet dad desire phenomenon that like is very disturbing to me.
Why? I mean, it's a little weird.
We got to be adults here. Like this thing where like this fictional character comes and says like, "Oh, it's actually Ted Lasso himself," and everyone pretends like it's fucking Santa Claus at the mall, and he has some deep things to say. I mean, we'll talk about it in the fun half. But anyway,
I know it's just, but like even I don't love the sexual. Like, why are we sexualizing Pedro Pascal as a society? And like that's totally normal, but that's a whole different thing.
I have no idea who Pedro Pascal is.
The guy from what? See, we're in different media circles right here. But yes, I thought that was. I think you're right. They're one and the same. He's the guy from Last of Us and the.
No, I haven't seen that yet. But like
I didn't like The Last of Us, but.
We also talked about in the post game.
half.
We talked about Minnesota passing school lunch and breakfast. Bernie talking about the primary in his new book about Elizabeth Warren failing to endorse him, even though she should have. And Tucker Carlson supposedly cares about truckers. I think people are taking that clip. I mean, you saw that clip of Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro arguing about. We talked about that, and I don't know
how people aren't missing that he's being reactionary.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kayfabe.
Like, it's also like I think people are right to point out that he basically set up Ben Shapiro as the Jewish guy looking to take all your. I don't think that was. I don't think that was beneath Tucker's awareness. But we talked about that and what the actual message about something like AI should be or self-driving. So patreon.com/leftreckoning. We went for about 2 hours in the post game last night, so you're going to want to get that.
All right. Well,
we also talked about Jimmy Dore and David Sachs.
Oh, wow. Packed. All right. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Dinner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dinner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back on the fun half of the Majority Report. Sam is headed to the airport to go to Florida for the PBD podcast, in case you guys missed that and are just joining us. Let's read some IMs. Todd Cobell, can y'all please dunk on Michael Knowles and his student film? I don't know.
We've done that before. I mean,
yeah.
his reel is old as hell, and I'm pretty sure if we didn't do it on Majority Report, which you might want to, I think we did, but we definitely did it on Michael Brooks' show back in the day.
Okay. Kentucky Bloomer, MR Crew, thoughts on the conflation in America of mental health equals mental illness? Seems too often mental health is talked about as something that can be treated with medical intervention, while in my opinion, mental health is a direct result of the daily experience and stress is caused by the systems in which we operate. That's a good, I agree, Kentucky Bloomer. Maybe that's a good way for us to get into this thing.
Yeah, I mean, both of them are not covered by American healthcare.
Is this in the sound sheet or is this?
This is no, this is not.
Okay.
But it's Jason Sudeikis and the cast of Ted Lasso at the White House press briefing 2 days ago, or maybe it was actually yesterday. Yeah. And for some reason, like Sudeikis mentions, like he didn't know this was going to happen. He doesn't seem prepared for this. And
why would he be? He's an actor at the White House talking about mental health
and like promoting like a new series of Ted Lasso, right? Like I assume there's a new season, or why the hell?
The third season just started, yeah.
Why is the White House serving that?
Well,
function?
because they were doing the Tonight Show, and just on that publicity trip, you might as well stop at the White House press briefing room too. So yeah, like I think I think the press briefings are pretty much shams and controlled illusions of sort of press openness, but I don't know that we should necessarily like make the whole thing of having fictional characters come and address them and then actually feel the question.
Yeah, maybe that's a little too far, but
yeah, the whole thing should be disbanded because like nothing really gets done here anyway. Karine Jean-Pierre is a liar. Regardless of who's in the White House, the person who is the White House press spokesperson, they're the liar in chief. That's the way you should understand these things.
And they're paid to advocate and defend and basically launder every single thing the administration represents.
It's PR. Exactly. It's internal PR for the presidency.
Exactly.
For this White House.
When
and
you're
so,
a press secretary, you're a PR official as opposed to a comms official.
Which is why it's just a little disturbing that these people like Jen Psaki then get cushy media jobs after, because going from PR to being the watchdog shouldn't be the easiest transition, and yet it is.
And it's a turnstile too. Like it did happen with Stephanopoulos, and Spicer's on Newsmax, like Kayleigh McEnany's on Fox. Like every single one of them does it.
Yeah, they get paid in media later. But this happened at this bizarre event with the cast of Ted Lasso. Here we go.
Many folks here in U.S. are focused on March Madness or the World Baseball.
Let's skip a little bit ahead because we don't need to see Karine Jean-Pierre. Yeah.
Talk about March
his
Madness.
unity agenda, and I know that Jason wants to share a few words, and so Coach Lasso, the podium is yours.
I appreciate it.
Here you go.
Thank you. I truly did not know it was going to be this one when on the way here, not until we were out here, so thank you for taking an interest, and I know you're here for bigger reasons than us, but I just want to say that on behalf of myself, everyone here with me today, and the numerous other folks that it takes to make our show Ted Lasso, it is sincerely an honor to visit the White House and to have the opportunity to speak to the President and to the First Lady about the importance of mental health. So like, no matter who you are, no matter where you live, no matter who you voted for, we all probably, I assume, we all know someone who has, or have been that someone ourselves actually, that's struggled, that's felt isolated, that's felt anxious, that has felt alone, right? And it's actually one of the many things that believe it or not, that we all have in common as human beings, right?
Can you pause it? I'm sorry. What we have in common is that we live under capitalism, and we also live in a country that has a for-profit healthcare system, so that you have to worry constantly about if my chronic condition is going to be covered by this, or is it going to cost $20,000, that kind of thing.
Or like if someone, say either yourself or a family member or somebody you know does have like a mental health episode or a psychotic break or something of that nature. Like, I haven't listened to this entire clip, but like, I can't imagine he's going to say, yeah, we need to make sure that that's insured for everybody, that no one will have to shoulder a back-breaking, overwhelming cost.
So, yeah, I mean, people are confused why we're playing this and says it's mostly harmless. This is not harmless, what's happening right here, and let me be explicit. The problem for this is not shame and people not having like the wherewithal to talk about this stuff. The problem is that people are price discriminated away out of care. Like, let's let him go a little bit further, and then we'll play a clip from Health Professionals for Medicare for All.
That means that it's something that we can all, and should talk about with one another when we're feeling that way, or when we recognize that in someone feeling that way. So please, we encourage everyone, and this is a big theme of the show, is like to check in with your neighbor, your coworker, your friends, your family, and ask how they're doing, and listen sincerely. You all ask questions for a living, but you also listen for a living. So who am I preaching to? The choir, that is. Okay. And look, and while it's easier said than done, we also have to know that we shouldn't be afraid to ask for help ourselves.
So this is not like, this is very this is rich person problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know anybody, like the idea that the big barrier is just personal shame that's a rich person's idea of the problem here. And the idea that like the solution, this could have all been fine if he instead used a moment to call for Medicare for all, like including this. We got this clip from. This was from the Bernie campaign, but these mental health professionals talking about what the actual barriers to mental health care are.
My work. But the biggest frustration in my work has nothing to do with the actual work. It's the American healthcare system itself.
One of my biggest frustrations with commercial health insurance is the restriction on access to mental health care that it places upon our patients.
If you think insurance corporations complicate getting medical services, you will be horrified to try to get mental health support.
I've had patients miss appointments because they could not afford the copay. I've had patients not take medications because they lost insurance.
It takes a lot for someone to reach out for mental health care. They should be met with an immediate, yes, I can help you.
So if Ted Lasso wanted to be, and his fictional ass wanted to go into the White House press brief room and say this, then I'm
all
interested.
for it.
Exactly. But Karine Jean-Pierre and the White House would not have invited him to do that, or indeed like suggested to him that he does that, if it was going to be anything more than just the shame thing. And look, I get that people think that like the shame thing. I'm sorry, like
No, but this is a version of that. It's also about your individual role in seeking out mental health care being through connections or someone else connecting with you. Like, that's actually undermining social solidarity, because what you should be advocating for is broad systems to help people. Sometimes people don't have anyone in their life for them to reach out and say, hey, are you struggling? And so that's...
The state should provide someone for them.
That's why it's harmful. And I think speaks to the way the Biden administration views the role of the government in ensuring health care for people.
Yeah, and I just think it's a degradation or a devaluation of the actual concern here, which is mental health, to get up there and just say, talk about it and, listen. It's like if you see something, say something. No, we need actual policies here that materially support people in seeking this. And I think we need to really graduate beyond this sort of moralistic, don't be too proud. Like, that's what you say to a rich person who isn't getting help and they need to. But that is not the main
pride is
barrier.
not usually the most important barrier for 99.9% of people in this country needing to seek mental health care. It's cost.
Exactly.
Cost.
And I think it's like a old conversation. We talked about this with Sam yesterday. Like, maybe that was true in Gen X or whatever. Like that was the huge barrier. But I honestly think the reason, now we're overly comfortable talking about that component of it and not the price discrimination. That is the real issue here.
Right. Yeah, I just I find it to be a little bit cartoonish, and in addition, when you and infantile, and when you make mental health care about just individuals stepping up, whether it be individuals in other people's lives or the individual who's struggling themselves, you undercut the movement towards like a Medicare for all single payer type system, but also you feed into a right-wing framing on this, which is what we're seeing in the wake of school shootings. Mental health, we just have to be more aware of it.
And it's almost like blaming the people around somebody having a mental health crisis. Like, oh, you should be there for them and listen to them. Like, that's good too, but there are times where that's not enough.
Yeah, and that's what the right wants mental health care to be, is about individuals checking in on the other, as opposed to a system, as we keep repeating over and over again, something like a Medicare for all system. And so then when this is the focus about mental health care, it becomes easy to blame individuals as opposed to, a societal structure.
Yeah, and to be honest, even if we can deal with the shame part once you deal, people can be on the low about their mental health care. They don't need to tell their family about it, but as long as it's provided, and then you can worry about that sort of stigma later.
Yeah.
After you've been, and you'll probably be more prepared to deal with it after you found somebody that can help you work through mental health issues.
Yeah, and I also don't think I don't necessarily think the substance is I don't think any of us are saying the substance is that Jason Sudeikis is saying up there is odious. It's not that. It's just, it's not. I don't think this isn't going to move the needle no matter what. A appearance at the White House press briefing, but basically just saying it's okay to talk to somebody when you have the pulpit of being at the White House press in the White House with the press secretary. I think it just becomes clear that there's no Jason Sudeikis is not going to provide a material solution.
No.
And it's just, at the end of the day, what can you look at this for beyond it just being lip service?
This is not dissimilar from a kind of liberal mentality about the climate crisis boiling down to your individual consumption choices. That undercuts larger action on climate change. And this kind of thinking, I think, undercuts larger action on healthcare.
Yeah, it sounded like a BetterHelp ad.
Yeah,
you might as well just have it literally sounded like the one we don't do BetterHelp anymore for ethical reasons. But you still hear it that exact same pitch. I just need help working through something, and then it's a coupon code.
Yep. All right, calling from a 419 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi there.
Hi.
Hey, everybody. Wow. First off, I want to say thanks for taking my call. And okay, sorry. All right, got myself all together.
But
been trying to reach out for a couple.
Who is this?
My name is Marcus. I'm from Ohio.
Marcus from Ohio.
All right. So, I just want to be upfront and tell you guys that I'm a former liberal, relatively conservative now, but I do believe that echo chambers are a bad thing. There are a myriad of issues I'd like to talk about, but I guess for today, do you mind speaking about guns?
Sure.
All right. Well, I don't want to start putting words into anybody's mouth. I'm trying to learn here myself. What would you think is a good solution to our firearm issue? And we could factor in mental health in there as well.
Okay. So to factor in mental health, we need a publicly funded universal health care system like Medicare for all or single payer, where people are able to access counseling and mental health services for free, and it's funded by the government. From the gun regulation standpoint, what we need is a legislation that targets the manufacturing and sale of the kinds of weaponry that are used to kill people in mass, and have registration systems and licensing that are universal throughout the country and not just on a state-by-state basis. How does that sound?
Well, I'm not a fan of registration. I don't think that would be, have we heard most of the pundits say that in a lot of the issues that have happened with guns, registration wouldn't have stopped those incidences?
I mean, can you prove, well, what pundits are saying that, first of all? And how about I want to hear your argument for it as opposed to saying that what pundits are saying.
My arguments, and again, I do believe echo chambers are bad. What I've noticed is the issue, the tragedy that happened in Uvalde.
Mm-hmm.
What was the other one? The incident I believe that happened in.
There's been lots. Let's talk broadly.
Double check about.
Yeah.
I can check about Buffalo and things of that nature.
No, but
a lot of these firearms were bought legally.
Okay,
okay. Well, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I'm saying. Do you think people should be allowed to buy, for instance, rocket launchers?
Oh, should people be allowed to buy what?
Rocket launchers.
Oh, rocket launchers can't be used defensively.
So no. So no?
Well, actually, wait, give me a moment. In the United States, I do believe we can own rocket launchers, but we can wait, if I remember correctly, we can own rocket launchers, cannons, and tanks.
I don't care what the law
but
is.
Do I believe we?
Do you think we
do
should?
I believe we should be? Do I think we should be able to own them? We could get back to what you really want to talk about, which is the AR, but I'm not answering.
No,
your question.
I want to ask you about the rocket launcher, which I did. Do you think people should be allowed free trade of rocket launchers in this country?
Well, we already can, but I would think about it. No, because I don't think we should own grenades. No, we shouldn't own grenades. Of course not.
So you basically agree that that's not like a violation of the Second Amendment to regulate which sort of class of weaponry that we can allow people?
Well, we don't use grenades, and I don't think there is a defensive use of a grenade or a rocket launcher.
Okay.
But where does this defensive use standard come from? Is that just something you made up?
Oh, no. It says in the Second Amendment for the got a little bit nervous. But the Second Amendment, first it talks about well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state.
Okay, but you believe that there's a line that can be drawn on what people can own in terms of weaponry. You're drawing it as defensive usage. At defensive usage.
That is essentially what it is. I think it's a red herring to start talking about. A lot of people would say nukes at this point. I think it's a red herring to talk about those things.
Didn't say that.
Stop arguing.
Yeah, I know. I just before that shows up, but yeah.
But okay, but say for defensive purposes, say what you would categorize as defensive uses to protect one's home, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
And
do you think people should be allowed to place, I don't know, versions of landmines? Say they have a big property around their home, in case people step in it if they're trying to trespass.
That's defensive.
That's defensive.
Well, I would say that's again some sort of a red herring, but I would have to double check if people have done that.
No, you don't. We're talking about the principle here. Do you think you said it's defensive weaponry?
Do I think they should?
No. Do you think they should be allowed to, or do you think the government should be able to say, like, hey, maybe don't landmine your yard?
I would honestly want people to vote on that because honestly, that might sound a bit crazy.
If it's a right, then that should not be left to the whims of the voters, should it not?
Well, we do have a living document, so let's see what we have.
So you're
here.
saying that this should be based on voter referendum?
Give me a moment. But I'm thinking about it right now.
Okay.
As I said, I'm thinking about it right now. I would not see an issue. It would be a bit strange, but I wouldn't see an issue with landmining your own yard. No.
Okay, so if someone accidentally steps onto your property, say you're in a big space and there's no really demarcation, there's no fencing.
Shouldn't have been trespassing.
Someone say
if an incident like that happened, you should absolutely be held responsible. I think what should happen there is you should have the right sort of signage and things of that nature.
What if they have signage?
But that's a regulation. But that would require. Hold on. That would require you to register with the government. I am landmining my yard, and that brings us back to the original point. You're against registration for this kinds of weaponry.
Oh yes, I am. I am against a lot of forms of registration because the only way that it could be enforced, the way a lot of these things could be enforced, registration, things of that nature, universal background checks. But continue, please.
No, but hold on.
No, but so actually, sorry, but we actually agree with that. Like, this is why I'm not super supportive of, like, say, empowering more cops to be the arbiters of who gets to, like, own a handgun or whatever. I think, like, that's concerning. But that is not like you should still have to register this stuff. Even if, like, say, it wouldn't have stopped the Las Vegas shooting or whatever. That sort of, like, but it didn't work in this case. That doesn't mean that.
But the second part that I proposed would have stopped the Las Vegas shooting or potentially helped it because I would ban the sale of automatic guns of the nature that we're using.
Now you do. Now again, we talk about semi-auto. I understand that, but that was not an automatic weapon used, and we don't need to drive too far into this, but I once defended a woman's life with one of those weapons people want to ban. We could find the story, but I'm not here to plug anything that I do online. But I can send you all those articles just so you know.
But could you? Did it have to have been an AR that you used, or could it have easily been like a different type of firearm, like a rifle?
Again, I don't want to go into the specifics of what occurred because I'm not here to plug my own fame. But when the gentleman who was attacking her first saw me and my handgun, he did not retreat. It was only after I ran away, grabbed the firearm that you guys want to ban, and said, "Sir, I'm armed. I've called the police. Please leave."
Well, how do you know that it wasn't you calling the police that caused him to leave, good sir?
Because the police were already called during the incident.
Okay.
He first tried to come into my house. We had a quick scuffle at the door. Then he tried to get back in. I drew a firearm. He then continued to try to get back in, trying to bust into my windows. I then barricaded myself into a room.
I appreciate the anecdote.
But I can send you articles. I can send you articles to this, but I'm not here to get famous.
Let me return. So you agree that there needs to be some regulation about landmining your yard, which would involve registration and signage, so that would have to be registered with the government. So that undercuts your notion that there shouldn't be forms of registration because you kind of conceded that there. And secondly, the banning, I'm not sure what weapon, I know he used a bunch of guns in the Las Vegas shooting, but shootings more broadly with automatic weapons.
And a switch.
I would be, ma'am, I do apologize.
I
don't want to interrupt you.
Banning those. And so that would actually, banning the sale and manufacturing of those. Are you conceding that would not curb mass shootings? Are you claiming that would not have any effect?
Well, the vast majority of mass shootings are done with handguns.
I know, but for the ones that are done with that kinds of weaponry, would that eliminate those?
No, I'm not trying to play I really am not trying to play a game, but none of these mass shootings that you would think of have been done with automatic firearms.
Were they altered? Were they have, like, say, a switch or bump stock on them?
No. Now, the Las Vegas shooting had a bump stock. Yes, it did.
Yeah. Okay. So should those be legal?
Yes, bump stocks should absolutely be legal.
They should be legal. Why?
And And they are.
So if you need to intimidate somebody and he's not going to be intimidated by just a regular AR-15, but you bring the bump stock
No.
stop in his tracks?
It's because when an incident occurs that you need to defend your life, you need to have the odds as lopsided in your favor as possible.
No, this is
I'm not the one threatening somebody else's life.
Are you shitting me?
No.
This does not. This is no. Your example, buddy,
it's about having the most effective tool.
Is having a what? So your example was simply like the existence of this gun, and it needed to be an AR-15 apparently, or the guy was going to knock the door down. I don't believe that. I think if you would have had a shotgun or something like that, he probably also would have stopped too. The idea that you need a switch or a bump stock, like, I'm sorry, if you, for instance, people say this like feral hogs example. Register with the Game and Fish Department if you need that so bad. Sorted. But like this idea that everyone needs to free trade bump stocks, I'm sorry, that's fucking ridiculous. And I come from guns. Like, I grew up around guns. That's fucking that is weekend warrior bullshit LARPing like ass like garbage to me. I think that's so embarrassing.
I have no interest in LARPing or warrior and all that other fun stuff. No. What I just want to do is have the most of it. It would be an effective tool to defend myself.
Let's paint the picture.
It would be an effective tool to defend myself. The fact of the matter is,
what are you imagining?
I myself.
From what?
Yes. Watch this. I'm going to explain. I myself, my girlfriend, who's 5 foot, 120 pounds. Guess what? A shotgun is a lot more difficult to use.
I know. Okay, so your sense, you want to be able to maximize the amount of protection that you have for your girlfriend. Look, in my opinion, that's some red flags in and of itself. But the point is that the societal cost is that we are continuing to arm everybody to the degree that you're describing because we've made these things legal. I mean, some of what you describe is illegal.
Yeah.
But even to the point that we've armed everybody, do you understand the way that like other countries structure their gun laws? They just have baseline bans for this kinds of weaponry. And then news to you, Marcus, you wouldn't have to go out to buy a bump stock. You could buy the guns that you want and register with the government, and you could still be the most armed guy out there, but we're just going to change the threshold level to reduce mass gun violence. Would you concede that that's kind of a fair way to draw this line?
To reduce mass gun violence, now I'm certain you've heard about this, it would take a lot of things that are outside of the firearm. I think it's political grandstanding to just go after the firearm and not the underlying issue.
Yeah, we all know that. I want to get back to this scenario where your 5 foot girlfriend needs you to have a bump stock instead of just an AR.
Oh, no. She could need it.
So
I would rather she defend herself with an AR platform rather than a shotgun.
An AR platform with a bump stock. So the AR platform isn't enough. You need the full-on bump stock. What scenario are you? What's coming after your girlfriend? What is coming after your girlfriend?
Well, the data point of only myself was just someone who was significantly larger than me. But just about anything can happen. We live in America.
Okay, but
what? I mean, this is like. Tell me what you're afraid of. Is it zombies or is it something else?
No, absolutely not. No. That's
okay. What
silly.
is it? What is it?
Anyone or anything that would threaten our rights to life, things of that nature.
And why don't you just get her a rocket launcher?
Absolutely not. There's no defensive use for a rocket launcher.
I could imagine defensive use of a rocket launcher. I mean, we give...
How am I going to defend my property when I've blown out my entire front yard shooting a rocket launcher at someone out of my house?
Landmines.
We should talk
that
about...
you register with the government. Booby trapping.
Yes, okay.
And then...
If someone had agreed to do that, that's the
point.
I mean,
that's quite odd. But again, we're speaking about ARs. But the real issue, the issue is obviously happening with these mass shootings, not with mass landminings, things of that nature.
But because we've drawn certain parameters about what is allowed in this society.
Some guy used that bump stock that you need your girlfriend going to use to like protect herself from like a horde of I don't know what.
No,
some guy used that to light up an entire fucking country music festival. So like I don't believe that this like I'm sorry man, like you like even if we can get these things about like okay, semi-automatics, we can't all ban that, but we should at least like when you say your girlfriend needs a bump stock on top of the AR, you're out there. Like ground control to Major Tom, you are out there, bro. You are living in.
Say someone. Well, the fact of the matter is there was a judgment that allowed bump stocks to come back, and then now they're doing this thing coming after pistol braces, which makes absolutely no sense.
Well, to us, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't think you should be able to.
Why should pistol braces be banned?
So you can't light up a whole room without
anybody. A pistol brace couldn't do that. I understand what you're talking about bump stock.
It is my deep desire that we demilitarize this country from weaponry, and I do believe it'll make us safer.
Yeah, and first of all,
it would be incredibly nice, but it's the reality that we live in. And the fact of the matter is,
you're naturalizing a situation that you don't want to change because you seem to have a personal investment in making yourself as armed as possible. You seem very afraid.
No, that is not the case at all.
No, it is.
It's just the case of it's my own reality.
Marcus,
not my own reality. It's what's outside of me.
It's what
has happened, what I've seen, and what came to my own door.
Yeah, no, it's what's on the television that you're afraid.
No, not on the television. It was at my door.
Look,
I'm telling you,
I defended a woman's life with a firearm.
I've also had situations where I've been worried about a guy using a gun. The idea that I needed a bump stock on top of an AR-15 to solve the situation, I think, is ludicrous. So have a good day.
Well, it was a pleasure speaking to you guys. Thank you so much for taking the time.
All right. Let's do another clip here.
Profoundly antisocial.
It's paranoid.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm sorry that happened to him, but at the same time, we're not making decisions about society on a case-by-case basis. We're making them in terms of what's best for.
The idea that you need an AR specifically, and not only an AR, but that story is just stupid. The guy, kept coming after a pistol. It happens. I've seen some guy get lighted up through a door trying to do that, even though the guy said I had a pistol. A shotgun would have stopped it if the bigger gun, dude. The idea that it's a specific type of semi-automatic that is going to be we're just making stuff up.
Yeah. So what should we do next here? Tulsi Gabbard. Dumb. I'll read some IMs while we're teeing some stuff up. This Nikki Haley clip. Okay.
Oh, yeah, this is good.
All right. Here is Nikki Haley on Fox News with Brett Baer. And there's been, because of that clip with Bethany Mandel, lots of a good push, I'm in favor of it, to get conservatives to define wokeness. And a lot of them just don't really seem to have coherent definitions for what it actually is. But Nikki Haley is convinced that wokeness is the number one threat that we are facing right now.
And this is a big issue in the Republican primary as well, woke and wokeness, and what that means for families around the country. You're quoted saying wokeness is a virus more dangerous than any pandemic, hands down. So for those families who look at you saying that and say, I don't know if wokeness, this pandemic took my family member, what do you say to them?
Well, I have friends and family members. My sister-in-law died from COVID. So, look, there's no one closer to it than our family, and we share that grief with all the other families. And that's the reason why I think we need to hold China accountable for exactly what they did to many families. But when you talk about wokeness, don't underestimate the dangers of what this is doing. The wokeness has caused so much damage to our children that we can't have that happen anymore. It is a plague that will impact them for the rest of their lives if we don't put a stop to it. It's dangerous. It's unhealthy. We're seeing it with anxiety and stress on our kids, and we've got to put an end to it.
Anxiety and stress. So lots there. We need to hold China accountable.
Yes.
Now, this is something to keep watching as the Biden administration gleefully moves us towards more belligerence with China because it helps him in his mind domestically, and also the neocons have been pushing for a pivot to Asia for decades at this point. Wherever they draw the line in terms of hawkishness, which is now the reopening of military bases in the Philippines on the back door of China, the two deals that we've made with Australia to arm ourselves and have a presence there outside of China as well. Plus, just let's ban TikTok. China's
awful.
China is maybe the lab leak theory. Maybe it was a bioweapon. All of this stuff is one and the same.
Here,
yeah, she's connecting the general bipartisan consensus about let's ramp up things with China to COVID, which is going to be the right-wing angle for it. But like whatever the Biden administration is doing right now is incredibly short-sighted, because all it does is enable China hawkery on the right and makes it more and more extreme. That's a bit beside the point there.
I do want to touch on this is schizophrenia on the part of the right and the anti sort of COVID folks, because simultaneously Nikki Haley would be like, we need to return to normal, let COVID go, Joe. And simultaneously saying, oh yeah, China made that as a bioweapon to attack us. So like, which is it? And the truth is they don't actually think that it is a bioweapon that China wanted to attack us. Although I do think even if they thought that, they would still tell American working people to go, maim themselves for a virus without, universal healthcare, for instance. But they just want to agitate against China.
Yeah. So that's her angle on it. But then, like, just the overall thesis there that wokeness was more dangerous than COVID. How many people died of COVID in this country?
Yeah, I like invoking my dead sister-in-law and be like, I do care about this. On the other hand, like, how many more sister-in-laws will die because of, wokeness?
Because of wokeness. We'll never know.
Because their kids are reading anti-racist Baby in school.
Yeah, and that is just like an extra level of depravity there, that she's so willing to cast aside the death of her family member in order to inflate the danger of, critical race theory, black people having a place in society where they're able to talk about systemic racism, being accepting of gay and trans people, with the disease that literally killed her family member. That's the lengths that Republicans will go to.
And that's why she seems, I think, so uncomfortable to even kind of like that's a hard pivot to make.
Yeah.
And it's one she should have known she was gonna have to make when she said it's worse than any pandemic. Just a really callous thing to say.
Could we watch the next clip after this one? Speaking of Bethany Mandel, her co-author of her book Stolen Youth, Carol Markowitz, who's a New York Post columnist.
Sure.
She was on Fox News with Fox's John Roberts, and I just wanted you guys to focus on what she's applying this definition of wokeness that she has to, specifically in terms of the use case.
Okay.
And what she says about it.
Let's go.
Youth is about how this is affecting even younger kids now. This lack of opinion and this really rigid forced conformity has come to our K through 12 spaces also. It used to be limited to woke college students, but now it's everywhere. And, I love that Whoopi's, finally aware of it and finally ready to fight back on it.
Sorry, to be clear, Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah, well, they're obsessed with Whoopi Goldberg on the right for some reason.
So it used to be limited to woke college students, but now it's everywhere. And, I love that Whoopi's, finally aware of it and finally ready to fight back on it. But again, maybe they should start on their show.
In fact, I want to just read a quote from your book. This is call for number 4, if I could. Your take on wokeism's effect on children, where you say, quote, if they can make our children miserable, lead them to question every building block of society and rebuild their entire concept of reality, then the left and their woke indoctrinators will consider that a victory. Go into a bit more detail on that.
Look, this isn't the first time in history that a totalitarian, minority has risen up and tried to shut down the views of the majority. And that's what's going on in America today. You're only allowed to have certain opinions. You're only allowed to state them in a certain way. And that's what wokeness is. It's a leftism, but it's coupled with a very forced conformity that even people who are on the left feel that they need to abide by, like Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh.
So, we see this happening in all facets of society. Our book focuses a lot on what's happening with children, specifically in schools, at their pediatrician's office, in the library, and so on. But the win for me is raising resilient children who won't shout down a speaker at their college because they disagree. And that should be really the goal for a lot of us.
Good. That's good. She's going to raise children that have the right values, not shouting down college speakers, but also being pretty explicitly racist to her classmates.
I also just think it's that's just why I wanted to highlight it as a little bit of a surprise, in the sense of like, this also just goes to show you how flimsy and useless this idea or this sort of definition of wokeness is. Like, you're applying it to like Whoopi Goldberg at The View, an extremely rich celebrity being annoyed that like someone maybe said like you're not using the right pronouns or something like that, and then also the Stanford Law event where when the actual video came out, the literal appointed Fifth Circuit judge was calling a student an appalling idiot and yelling at them,
calling them a teenager, and that's when the response of like, what are you, 92
right,
or whatever
in the
came back.
In the sense of like this idea that like those two incidents validate or absolve her of like any sort of critique of their definition of wokeness, which Bethany Mandel could not actually muster in a live interview, is absurd.
Well, and then at least this co-author here had a ton of time to come up with her definition. And when you find the definition, when you get to it from her, it is so broad that it's completely inscrutable. And then her entire complaint is that you can't say this because of wokeness, as she says it on Fox News. We're in that wokeness is now a part of cancel culture, and this is just a recycling of every conservative aggrievement talking point since I've been following politics in my lifetime.
And Matt, didn't you also pull that quote one time from 1902 that was like, we can't say anything anymore? Like,
yeah,
it's this idea of like sort of like, there's no rhetorically people can't say anything anymore. It's hundreds of years.
That was Matt found the old newspaper clipping of complaints that you couldn't say that Abe Lincoln was a descendant of monkeys anymore, right?
Yeah, it was the stinking PMC. At that point, it was the Democrats,
the wokesters,
or Republicans, the stinking PMC Republicans who run all the newspapers were afraid to show a comparison of Abraham Lincoln's profile and a ape's profile because of how similar the skull shapes were.
Yeah. So a tale of as old as time.
Phrenology.
The discourse has moved past their idiotic perspectives because of, the collection of knowledge. And then that's the same thing as persecution. And we've seen this before in history, she says. Woo! Well, we certainly have.
No,
not in the way that you're describing it.
Charles Murray used to do this too. Like, no, everyone's afraid to talk about this. No one can say these things. And then you actually look at the things, and it's like junk science, clearly racially motivated by a scam artist like Charles Murray, who's like posing as a scientist, and like people like Andrew Sullivan, a lot of the same people, laundering as like a sort of like beleaguered social scientist, when in fact he's just like a racist hack.
Let's do this Tulsi Gabbard thing for a sec. I miss mocking her. We don't hear enough from her.
Military intelligence personnel, Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, you can really know everything you need to know about Tulsi Gabbard when you look into her background and the cult that she came from, and the cult members that seem to still kind of populate her inner circle, including when she was in Congress, staffing as on either her campaign or in her actual congressional office. I can't remember.
And also, this independent-minded voice now had to switch her party registration. Notably speaking at a lot of events like this one at the Palmetto Family Council Summit in South Carolina this weekend. I guess a few other speakers there. Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn. a lot of right leans for Tulsi in terms of what the company she keeps now.
Yeah, but she's independent.
For an independent.
And what's interesting too is that this is actually nothing new. She'd been speaking at right-wing events for a long period of time, including, events raising money and awareness for the fascist BJP party, where she has tried to make inroads on behalf of her cult. Well, here she is speaking at this event in South Carolina, returning to her roots, which are, yes, anti-Muslim, but also predominantly anti-gay, anti-LGBTQ, and just parroting the points that she has heard on the Daily Wire in her rolling audition to either be a Fox News personality or a vice presidential candidate.
Yeah, look it up. Her first appearance in public was on a campaign ad for her dad, an anti-gay politician in Hawaii, saying, "I wouldn't marry my daughter," is very strange.
Well, the fact that he needs to say it means that there's nothing weird there at all.
Yeah, nothing strange about this cult environment.
We just celebrated International Women's Day last week. I was scrolling through social media, seeing, what are people saying about it. And you saw a lot of nice flowery words coming from a lot of people in Washington, celebrating women and all the women have accomplished over the years, and all these great, inspiring examples of women leaders throughout our time. We know the hypocrisy there. You ask them what is a woman, and they can't answer the question. And one of the people they chose to honor in the White House on International Women's Day was not a woman at all. It was a biological male.
Nice.
There are two major points here. Number one is there is no greater expression of hatred and hostility towards women than to try to erase our existence as a category of people and to minimize us to being a construct of anyone's imagination. And the second thing that doesn't get talked about often enough as
Sorry,
we are
let's see what the
looking
first thing. It's interesting these, I think, anti-imperialist hucksters get the opportunity to do what I would say, like, an occasion to maybe remind folks of the socialist lineage of the International Women's Day, started by New York socialists in 1909, followed up on by German socialists in 1910. Or they could go and take a swipe at trans people. You saw this in the so-called anti-war debate, which is actually, like, in many places a pro-Russian invasion thing, where Anya Parampil, Max Blumenthal, Jimmy Dore couldn't help but take swipes at trans people. It's a sickness.
And I just want to note, too, that we've been saying, I think I've been saying this, too, like in the year lead up to this extreme anti-trans ramp-up, also led by Fox News. Rupert Murdoch and his British media outfits and Australian media outfits have been doing this for a while, creating the environment that created TERFism, where feminism has been laundered to and distorted to discriminate against trans people. And now we're seeing that come ashore in the United States. She does not speak for women. She does not speak for feminists. And it is interesting to me that the right fights against feminazis and feminism up until, okay, this might not be tenable for us right now. Let's distort it and use it for another bigoted end, since we got to bring women back into the fold. We lost a lot of them in especially in suburbia because Trump was so uncouth. Maybe we can get enough of them that hate trans people or who are terrified enough that their kids might transition in their middle school. So it's incredibly cynical, her use of feminism, but we continue.
And the second thing that doesn't get talked about often enough as we are looking at this insanity is that by rejecting the objective truth that there is such a thing as a woman, they are rejecting the existence of objective truth as a whole. And when we remove those boundaries of what is actually true and false, not my truth or your truth or their truth or whatever it is, that there is such a thing as objective truth, then we remove all the boundaries of our society and we end up in a position, what we're seeing right now, where what is declared as true is based on whatever those in power say that it is.
Okay.
And we've seen again how this.
So was she going against truth when this was just 4 years ago, January 17, 2019? Less than a week into her campaign for president, Hawaii Rep. Tulsi Gabbard issued a lengthy apology for her past comments and actions against the LGBTQ community. Since Gabbard, a 37-year-old Iraq War veteran, announced on CNN last Friday that she was joining what's expected to be a crowded Democratic field for President 2020, her past comments and actions have been under a microscope, including her work for an anti-gay organization and remarks calling LGBTQ activists homosexual extremists. And she said this: "In my past, I said and believed things that were wrong and worse. They were very hurtful to the people in the LGBTQ community and to their loved ones." So she's apologizing there, but now she thinks that it's an attack on objective truth.
How long until someone asks her about it and she says that's what she had to do to just gain more knowledge as a double agent in the Democratic Party? We're a step or two away from that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they'll love her for it, because the right loves nothing more than a grifter who pretended to be on the left and then leaves the left because they've just gone too far.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice that our anti-war folks are so, enthusiastic about somebody who's literally military intelligence. Like, Tulsi Gabbard should not be allowed to be a politician and be in military intelligence. Like that should not, like, DeSantis also shouldn't have, like, Stefanik, the other who's a Democrat.
Yes.
CIA or military intelligence people.
It's Slotkin.
Slotkin.
Oh, Slotkin. Yeah. Oh yeah, I confused that too.
Slotkin, like these
Spanberger too.
Like,
yeah.
This is these people are anti-democratic, and Tulsi can pretend like she's like not that, but that's exactly what she is. Like, don't ask Tulsi what she's doing on the Horn of Africa.
I mean, they're just like mini Michael Flynn's. Not to be
right.
He might be insane, but they all
so
come
Tulsi.
from. They all come from. So is she, but they all come from the same, rotten tree.
And this is also just what's so insidious about TERFs, whether they're cis hetero TERFs like Tulsi, or like someone like, or also like J.K. Rowling, like you said, in terms of like the history in Australia and the UK surrounding, TERFs, Graham Linehan, other people who have been radicalized like this, but also people like Dan Savage, the leader of the It Gets Better campaign, who a lot of these people basically it just seems like they want rights for women, rights for gay people, cis gay people, and then basically now that there's an even more marginalized group than them, like trans people, trans women of color, trans sex workers, to lift up the ladder behind them and close the door.
Yep.
And start gatekeeping, just like white people gate kept black people and other minorities out of any of their rights, any of their purchase, any of their suffrage. And so it's just repeating a cycle of supremacy over another group, cycle of oppression over another group. And if feminism is actually about what it should be about, which is liberating women, but also liberating everybody under our capitalist structures, then trans people are firmly within that umbrella. But people like that who don't believe that go up at the Palmetto Family Council and say shit like this.
Yep. Well said. All right, let's take a call really quickly. Calling from a 701 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Huzzah! This is Alyssa from North Dakota.
Oh, Alyssa from North Dakota. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. What's on your mind?
Okay, so I don't know. Like, I could seriously talk for 6 hours, so I don't want to get too deep into it. But I did want to mention was it Marcus from Ohio?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So that was, I was cackling a little bit to myself when you guys were talking to him. I currently live in Ohio. I'm born and raised in a really small town in North Dakota. And yeah, also just, like Matt, grew up guns around, whatever. It was just part of daily life, but you ultimately respected that. And you weren't worried about hordes of other people breaking down your door. I don't think. I mean, I didn't have that experience ever, but yes, I am from a small place. But there were guns everywhere. So again, and now I live in Ohio, and I do live in a not great part of Ohio, and I still don't want or feel that I need, that level of protection.
Yeah.
You don't need a bump stock to be able to do 30 rounds in a minute.
No, I need a couple. I mean, if I was really that, I got a fence in my backyard and, some motion lights.
I mean, if you can't saw down a tree with just purely bullet fire, are you really safe?
And it's and I don't want to dismiss people's worry, because I also do have a lot of empathy for people who live in high crime areas, people that, are dealing with really messed up situations. I never had to experience that. So that is something that I don't naturally worry about. So I don't want to be too dismissive, but I also kind of want to be like, can we just bring it back to the fact that we are in a supposedly functioning democracy?
Yeah, society.
And we are not like shooting each other in the streets because we're breaking each other's windows in our neighborhood. And maybe that is happening somewhere in Ohio, but I live in a not great part of Ohio, and that's not super prevalent. I don't know.
No,
I also live.
You're being kind, but it's go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know. I grew up in a small town. I lived in, then I moved to Fargo, obviously, because you can't do anything in a small town. And for school and whatnot. And then we moved to Ohio like 5 years ago, and we've bounced around a couple times. We've been in a couple places, but all in Northeast Ohio. And I am just perplexed by so many things, especially kind of the way everything operates here. Like, we live in a township, but we also live in a city, so we pay double property taxes, but like we don't really get city services, so we have to pay for our own garbage. It's really it does not make sense to me. So
I mean, it makes sense. It would make sense to you if you were avoiding higher taxation, because that's all like this. The patchwork. You see this in like Jackson, Mississippi too. Like the sort of municipal line gerrymandering, tax sort of jurisdiction gerrymandering, is like a kind of. I mean, we know about this broadly with white flight, but this happens within all cities and stuff too. And it's a really good example of why local is not better, and this stuff should not be when you carve this stuff up, it just screws people over, except for the most powerful.
Oh yeah, and the thing is that I'm very privileged. I am, my husband. The reason we moved here, he got a really good job in the one last remaining industry.
Yeah,
that's here. But when we got here, and I was like, oh, I want to go see what their downtown is like. I want to go. What's Akron like? What is that place like? What is Canton like? I wanted to see where I lived and what I could do for work. And, you have to start living in your community. And I was just I was just really culture shocked maybe with the way that everything in the city just seemed to be falling apart. And all the money
to North Dakota,
was being invested farther and farther outside of the city.
Yes.
And I am in between cities now, in a township suburb of a suburb of a suburb,
right.
Just so that we could, and at the time the housing market was crazy, so we were getting outbid and all this stuff, so we just grabbed our house. We're this is perfect, it's just right, we don't have to, and it's just been very confusing. It's obvious that they make it difficult and complicated in order to discourage people from bothering to deal with it. And I think that's kind of the main game plan, the most conservatives. It's well, if we just fuck it up enough, if we just mess this up enough and people are unhappy with it, we can tell them why they're unhappy with it without them actually looking into it. And because that's kind of the same with my dad. He's very conservative and whatever. And I grew up kind of as an observer of my very small town,
right.
This doesn't seem right, and then I was also growing up in the age of internet. So it was and I feel such a disconnect with the older generation at this point.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I can't figure out what my father's talking about. Sometimes I have to Google things. Figure out what Fox said the night before, to figure out why he's mad at Adam Schiff for getting rid of the First Amendment.
Yeah.
But that was because he proposed again an amendment that just wanted to reinstate or repeal Glass-Steagall or whatever. Citizens United.
Well,
they don't, but he doesn't know what those things are. He just thinks, well, they don't want me to say swear words in public. It's what the.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got to jump, but Matt.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We're gonna.
Has any final points you want to say before we let you go?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I watch you guys for the catharsis of other people understanding how fucked up things are.
I really
I'll leave you with
appreciate
that.
Yes. Well, that's
Thank
what
you.
I want to provide, honestly, because I mean, I don't know. It can be very alienating to be on the left sometimes, especially in particular spaces. And being on the left also distinct from being a liberal as well. There's not enough solidarity largely with that.
It's really sad seeing, and I mean, I understand it, but like when I was growing up, the sort of liberal, particularly if you were gay, you moved to Fargo often, but really Minneapolis or probably Denver, and you see a lot of this going on in the wake of all these anti-trans bills. Another thing Tim Walz did, in addition to this school lunch thing, is sign a bill, I believe, affirming trans or like protecting trans affirming care. And so, yeah, people moving to Minnesota away from all these states, and it's, you know, it's a type of brain drain. Like I'm also somebody who left North Dakota, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I just feel like I know lots of people that were I was in like newspaper with in high school and stuff, like all of us left.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real thing. All right, let's do this Crowder Alex Jones thing, and then that'll be our final clip. Read some IMs, get out of here. Maybe we'll have time for another call. We'll see. So Alex Jones went on Steven Crowder's program after Crowder was in a hole, some sort of hiatus, hiding from Candace Owens' not so subtle attempts to blackmail him into stopping this war against the Daily Wire, which seems to have worked.
Well, it worked, yeah. I mean, it looked like it might have been a stunt to promote his new sort of
media venture
with Rumble, invested in by Peter Thiel, David Sachs, and host of also like Russell Brand and Jimmy Dorrance, people like that.
So they're trying to expand their reach. But yeah, he did, when she said, "We all know things about you," and then he was quiet for a month. I'm just taking note of that. Anyway,
that's what they call in Marine warfare a shot across the bow.
That is what I have heard that phrase before. Yes, good. But anyway, so Alex Jones goes on Crowder. They speak about Trump. Alex Jones tries to be the voice of reason for Trump, saying like, "Hey, you don't want to rile up the masses, right? You know, that's not something that you should engage in." Maybe speaking from his own personal experience, but here we go.
Do you think there will be protests if he's indicted?
Oh, well, I've got an issue with Trump on that. And I'm not saying he didn't have the right to say it. I'm not saying he's wrong to say it, but I would have said it better. We got set up on January 6th. We know that now. A million people came there. A few hundred attacked the police. The police hit themselves with tear gas. We now have the footage.
Yeah.
That's how the first breach happened. But then they waved in the other.
Yeah, I mean, this is
40 different lies. 1 million people?
Also, like you weren't
the setup.
Like the setup. There's this idea that the setup was like the deep state.
Ha.
It was also your media, like your entire media.
It was actually you.
Yeah,
bro.
like all you talking about
Charlie Kirk bussing people there. Alex Jones speaking, riling people up.
Steven Crowder doing hyperventilating on election night, saying, "Oh, they're putting. Look at what's going on in Arizona. Look at what's going on in Michigan. Look at what's going on in all these places." That is what set them up to put themselves in legal jeopardy on January 6th. What's her name that got shot? She died as a result. Ashley Babbitt is dead because of the GOP campaign lies.
Yeah. So he. All right. Let's continue. The Alex Jones is going to lie, but I couldn't let that slide.
Know that now. A million people came there. A few hundred attacked the police. The police hit themselves with tear gas. We now have the footage.
Yeah.
That's how the first breach happened. But then they waved in the other folks and have put almost 1,000 of them in jail. It's an American gulag. It's absolutely terrible. And then Trump says take our country back, protest if I get indicted. Well, you could see then how some people will think take the country back, and then if some provocateurs do something, they can now point right at Trump and say, see, he basically pushed him to do this. So it does look like he's trying to use the public to push right up to the edge. And I think in this powder keg volatile situation we're in, we don't need to be like Antifa that just tried to burn down the police station.
All right, pause this for a sec.
We don't want to be.
You know, he's just like, hey, Trump, you've got to be careful with your words
because
here.
this puts me in trouble too. Like that's the thing is when Trump gets in legal jeopardy, all of a sudden texts start getting access and stuff like that, and it's like, oh shit, look at all this stuff look at he was talking, or his campaign advisor was talking with Alex Jones on this date or whatever.
It's so funny too that he's saying, look, you got to be careful with your words because you might influence some people to do some bad things and they might get in trouble. Like, hey, you might get in trouble, buddy. Remember what happened to me? I've influenced all those guys to harass the Sandy Hook parents and get them to move 8 times.
It'd be a real shame if I was named in another lawsuit, so don't implicate me again.
I'm trying to protect you from libel lawsuits, Donald.
Like them out shooting people at 4-way stops. So they want violence because they're losing hearts and minds. We don't want to be like Maxine Waters saying go out and get violent. We want to be the opposite.
Like
I get
me.
it's pissed. I get it's wrong. Someday there may be a 1776 issue where things are so bad we got to get physical. But I think we should exhaust all the remedies first. And I don't think if there is a violent revolution, it should be randomly attacking police or Capitol buildings. Of
course.
It should be how George Washington would do it. And I'm not wargaming that here. I'm just saying physical war is a very serious issue, and it shouldn't start in some riot.
Yeah.
Which
I don't think he wanted, but like you're saying, he didn't word it maybe prudently. There's one thing that's like, hey,
reckless.
Protest, make your voices heard peacefully, which he did, by the way, on January 6th.
He did.
But this, just being in a written
He also
post,
called
it'll be easy.
He called it trial by combat, or was that Rudy Giuliani? Like the idea that this idea that he has actually he wants this. Like, and there's a reason he's doing the exact same thing again is because he wants the same outcome.
Yeah.
Like if he gets indicted, he wants them to storm barricades because that's what he's their daddy. And if they don't come and protect him, like what has all this been for?
But that's the whole point of what Trump is doing when he's truthing out, come protest on my behalf. It's an intimidation tactic for the people that could potentially put him in jail.
Exactly.
And so when you hear people say like, oh, do we want to actually pursue justice and pursue charges against Trump because there's going to be retaliation in the masses amongst the masses? That's the exact thing that that kind of thinking is exactly what people like Trump want, which is don't come after the powerful because there's going to be backlash. But it's interesting to hear that kind of come out of Alex Jones's mouth because he knows all too well what happens when you rile people up with lies.
Lawsuits happen and Discovery gets up your ass.
I also think Alex Jones just showing how he's not that different than the standard Republican thinker at this point. They all are worried about what Trump and the cult that he's created is doing to the conservative movement broadly. And more January 6th events where the crazies are protesting and get arrested for maybe a potential violent act does nothing for the Republicans except bad. But here we go.
One thing is like, hey, protest, make your voices heard peacefully, which he did, by the way, on January 6th.
He did.
But this, just being in a written post, it'll be easy for the media to paint.
He's got a lot of power.
Sure.
He's got a lot of power, and it'll allow them to plant provocateurs like Ray Epps again into their provocateurs, some hotheads. And so it's like, listen, if you're filling up your tractor with gasoline and it's your farm, do you have a right to smoke a cigarette while you're doing it? Yeah, but it's probably something you shouldn't do.
Right.
And so he's lighting up
what's
the
the metaphor?
while he's playing with.
What's the farm here? Like elections, or I guess the justice system.
That was nonsense.
Do we want more of that, or we could?
Yeah. Well.
Responsible.
Looks like right. He's got a little shell shocked from being under like a multi-billion-dollar judgment.
I mean, just the thing is, and this is similar to that Charlie Kirk clip we played, but when Alex Jones says we need to exhaust like the sort of measures, presumably like elections and stuff, but Steven Crowder's telling you that you can't trust those elections, that there's a conspiracy against the truth of that. So is Alex Jones part of the conspiracy, or is maybe Steven Crowder lying on that to cover up the fact that his like entire reaction to the election night was hysterical lying?
And it wasn't multi-billions, it's but it's over $1 billion, right? Over $1 billion in his judgment? There's been 2 separate ones, so I can't keep track. But anyway, just a quick correction. All right, guys, let's...
Well, almost $1.5 billion, 1.4, it seems like, from that initial settlement.
All right, quick call, and then we'll read some IMs and get out of here, but you got to be quick. Calling from a 706 area code. You got to be quick. Who's this where you're calling from?
Eugene from North Georgia, and I'm not that quick, so I'll just let you guys go.
Oh, okay. Well, you can call back in tomorrow, Eugene. All right, then one more here. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this where you're calling from? Final caller of the day.
Oh, this is Kevin from Ohio. I represent the Thieves Guild. So we had this incident recently where one of our guys, part of the Horde, as we are known, was just trying to do some thievery. That's how we make our money. That's how we put food on the table for our children and stolen children.
Hashtag
Anyways,
the Horde.
I need your help. We need to ban assault weapons because these are the only things that we are afraid of. I've played Call of Duty. You can take multiple hits from a pistol. So if you try driving off intruders with pistols, it don't work. But as soon as a Giga Chad pulls out an AR-15, like you've lost.
Yeah.
You have to retreat.
You don't even have the ability to go refuel and get some food and then like make yourself healthy again, right? Or am I mixing video games?
No, I mean, if you try to run us off using pistols while we're banging on your windows for whatever reason, eyeing up the TV and your 100-pound girlfriend, I mean, like, what are we supposed to do once you pull out the AR-15? It's hurting the Thieves Guild. Not a single member of the Horde is okay with this. So will you stand with us in banning these weapons?
I mean, we have to ask the Horde first, right? They are our senatorial body on this kind of thing.
That is true. We are very democratic,
yes.
Sort of. You have to be a landowner. It's this whole thing.
All right, Kowalski, anything else on your mind before I let you go?
No, that was about it. I mean, if you have to use an AR-15 for home defense, I don't want to know who your enemies are, but wow, you must have like the mob and the cartel after you. I would recommend moving. Maybe you just like the FBI should put you in witness protection. Also, a shotgun for home defense is probably your best option. About as much kick as a rifle without the threat of, going through 5 sheets of drywall and taking out the cat or the neighbor.
And a shotgun
just
shot,
a thought.
pretty deadly.
Yeah,
kind of blows through the whole person's whole chest.
Oh, yeah. Range. Even if they're wearing Kevlar, you're still knocking them on their ass.
Oh,
yeah.
Anyway.
So, yeah. Oh, also, 2 things real quick. Most mass shootings are done with assault rifles for a couple of reasons. That's better for range, higher magazines. It's just why it's done that way. However, the maximum number of gun deaths is predominantly pistols because obviously suicides lead most of the gun fatalities. In most cases, that and pistols are far more common for interpersonal problems. But as far as like mass killing events, it is rifles, just with high capacity magazines.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. I need to get back to the Horde. Goodbye.
Bye, Kowalski.
Good luck, Kowalski. Don't run into any bump stocks.
Bye-bye. Sorry, guys.
I like being in your house and thinking like, oh yeah, I can safely spray 90 rounds in like 60 seconds or whatever bump stocks can get up to. Like that's going to really save me.
I mean, you need to protect the 100-pound girlfriend.
In case the Dallas Cowboys are invading my apartment.
Brandon Tarkatoff overheard at a Mike Pence campaign slogan brainstorming session. We need something catchy that will resonate with the MAGA base, preferably a 3-syllable phrase ending in the candidate's name. It should be a call to action echoing a sentiment that people have heard before. It should be empowering, familiar, and even a little dangerous. What's the first thing that comes to mind? I don't know. With Mike ending in the candidate's name. Pence? I don't know. I don't know the joke. Jerv, leftist tyrants like Matt and Emma don't want men to be able to protect fair maidens from Antifa with multiple rocket launch artillery and anti-personnel explosives.
Hey, you're trying. Yeah, exactly. You're trying to take the bump stock AR-15 out of Princess Peach's arms as Bowser is closing in.
Bowser is pretty scary. I mean, King K. Rool. Come on, that would be the scarier one. Then Bowser?
I don't know King K. Rool.
He's the scariest one. King K. Rool. That's the real threat.
Not the singer King Cruel.
No, King K. I mean, come on. Even I know this. He's a villain in one of the Mario games. Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, you're right. He's also in Melee.
He's in Donkey Kong.
The new Super Smash.
Oh,
okay. I'm
He's
confusing.
The big alligator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I like playing with him in Super Smash. I like the heavier characters because I'm not very skilled. Because I'm bad, so I play with the heavier characters. Adam from Indiana. I'm sick of this cancel culture talk from these people. You can talk freely and use your right to free speech, but that doesn't give you the right to an audience or your piece of the free market that you love so much. Listening to conservatives is just aggrievement after aggrievement. I know. Between the 1 and 1 and the 5, growing up in a Hindu culture, it is so insulting that Tulsi is actively anti-trans. Hinduism has a thousands-year-old tradition of a third gender. Siva is depicted as non-binary, and many other deities. It is a part of our tradition. That is a good point. It's the problem is just that their sect is not in the teachings of traditional Hinduism, and it's just she's using that as an opportunity to tie into nationalism outside of the texts of Hinduism.
Right. She's Hindutva. I wonder how Hindutva specifically feels. And her guru
was rejected by mainstream Hinduism. Was he not?
Some psycho bigot. White dude. I'll just say that.
Right.
Seems pretty
surfer guy.
Those clips of him. Unbelievable of him being homophobic.
Also, they had a policy of essentially teaching pretty explicit sexual stuff to children in that cult. So next time you hear her talk about groomers, just understand that that's policy.
Projection.
And projection. A from Canada, American gun laws are so lax that the worst shooting in modern Canadian history was carried out by someone who had acquired those weapons from the U.S. That's how dumb your laws around guns are. I also love the guy thinking he's protecting his rights instead of an industry's profit margin. I know. Well, the conservatives get tricked into that easily. Look at the gun, the gas stoves freak out too.
You think the bump stock manufacturers are thinking about profits, or are you thinking of they're thinking about all the lives they're saving?
They're thinking about the women that are under the average weight. Might not be able to pick up a shotgun.
And the hordes that might be after them.
Yeah. Eat It, 1977. I really think I need to stay away from the kids because depression and anxiety in kids has nothing to do with liberalism. I really need the right to stay away from the kids. Kevin from Cali, Republicans are scared of woke people teaching their kids empathy, which will make their kids realize that the Republican Party is filled with freaks that will hurt people instead of help them. Yep.
It's like Graham Linehan, that comedian who destroyed his whole life with transphobia. This stuff is alienating, and that's why they're so upset about it.
Roni fan, this dude needs Mace and a taser. Jay Tingle, dude needs a bump stock on his AR-15 in order to defend himself from the threat posed by that huge crowd of country music fans enjoying a concert outside his Las Vegas hotel.
Exactly.
Wyoming Ryan, gun people in my experience are the most fearful people in society. They somehow have this expectation that they have to be 100% safe and protected in every situation at the expense of others' liberty and peace. Just ask them what they're scared of and they'll go away. And can the caller prove that he and his girlfriend would have been murdered by that guy? No one is guaranteed safety. It's silly. Yeah.
I mean, I think the idea that it needed to be an AR-15 instead of like another kind of like long rifle or shotgun particularly, I think is just... I mean, sure, if that's what you say, but I wasn't there, I guess.
Daredevil, Emma Matt, please give this former liberal gun lover a break. His small girlfriend can't fire a traditional gun because anime body pillows don't have hands. Okay. Tortuguita says disarmament is a whole rat's nest because fees, registration, insurances, and training requirements, as well as discretionary confiscation / issues placed within police departments, will have disproportionate effect on already vulnerable groups like trans and POC. I mean,
that's true.
Of course, it's a rat's nest, but it's not. We're not going to make it. I don't think we are in a place to require gun clawbacks, but we can make buyback programs as lucrative as possible because the government has the money to fund them.
Also, I think, like, I agree. I don't like the empowerment of cops. That's why I think the game and fish departments should be in charge of that. And I do think
targeting the manufacturing.
Yeah, but like the licensing and like the sort of like administrative stuff shouldn't be through cops. It should be through something like game and fish. And I do think that still will probably make it easier for, like, say, suburban white guys to get guns than anybody else. But I think that's better than empowering the cops. And I do think that is a concern.
All the pronouns right says, I know we support Medicare for all, but for fuck's sake, please don't give this guy free therapy that he needs on the show. Okay. Brett in Bang, Oklahoma says, my brother in Pennsylvania has severe schizophrenia. They tried to kick him off Medicaid this year, but they claim that owning a car put him over the $2,000 wealth limit. He fought it and won. He's 40 and he wants to get a job and live on his own again, but the only way he can save money for that transition is by working under the table and hiding cash in a shoebox. Pennsylvania doesn't want him to become a productive worker. It is psychotic.
Yeah, yep. And apologies for my cavalier use of schizophrenic earlier.
Duber, I think you guys are overblowing this quite a bit. You're also not covering the huge issues in how mental health works. Therapists are required to quantify their patient's mental health and then demonstrate the patient is getting better to get insurance reimbursements. That's a process that gets in the way of actually providing good mental health and wouldn't be solved by Medicare for all alone. Look, my best friend is a psychologist. There is a massive incentive in New York in particular and other high income areas not to even go through insurance because the bureaucracy is so ridiculous. And in wealthy areas, you can just get people to pay out of pocket and it becomes a boutique expense, a boutique service for wealthy people. What Medicare for All would solve, in part, would be to normalize this process so more psychologists can actually provide care for people. And then it wouldn't be such a massive barrier to entry, and you wouldn't have like predatory companies like BetterHelp kind of trying to fill in that gap.
But I'm sorry, like Ted Lasso was also not helpful to the point you're making. Like that he was even farther away from that than we were.
I mean, it's just honestly, I saw a tweet saying mental health is entering breast cancer awareness territory. Like, we're all aware of mental health. Yeah. Now what? And I think like flattening the discourse to like include to make it just about awareness is actually harmful.
Like, and I also think like that like this thing that is needed wouldn't solve all the problems. Not helpful.
Yeah.
Just simply not helpful.
Connor from Jersey, I love the mental health talk nowadays. We just need to be able to admit we need help. No, I need help paying for $200 an hour therapy that my insurance doesn't cover. I'm perfectly able to tell people I have anxiety. Yeah.
It's really a generational thing. It's all like people from Biden to Sudeikis like generation that grew up with this that being the main sort of understood barrier to mental health is people being too embarrassed to do it.
Yeah. All right, 3 more. Lose a sale says, is Sam going to Florida to arrest Trump? We can't say. Extradite him. June, Emma, are you into girls? All right, well, it's just this. Why don't I read just like for a second before? All right, I'm doing 3 more just to get the taste out of my mouth there. Man Shovel, Donkey Kong Country, Emma. I don't know.
Smash Brothers player.
I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, so why do I weigh in? Noah from Tampa, American Society of Psychiatrists had been saying for years that mental health access is largely just a factor of wealth. Also, the thing about Medicare for All is that that's also a society telling us that we're worth being cared about. So I feel like a big reason is generally rejected in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think like again, like I'm not one of these people who said the universal program is going to solve everything. Even like the universal breakfast and lunch in Minnesota, there's still going to be things that, certain kids are disadvantaged by. It's not a panacea, but those sorts of things are dealt with after you deal with giving people material support that raises them up to a level.
I mean, like, why does the barrier to entry for things that have to be good mean that like they need to be a panacea? We see this with housing, we see this with healthcare. Give me a break. Like, let's start with doing the good thing, and then we can see if there's like cracks.
The gun thing too, like with this gun regulation wouldn't have solved this one. So
yeah,
right. What the fuck are you talking about?
And the final I am of the day, Matt from New Jersey, King K. Rool is a bitch compared to Bowser. Whoa! All right, guys. Appreciate it. We will see you tomorrow for an M Majority Report Thursday. Check out ESPN. Check out Left Reckoning. Soon, Sam on PBD. Bye-bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between